Hello everyone, and welcome back to Mr. Night Fear. I know many of you listen to these stories to help you fall asleep. So, before you get settled in, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from. And if you're enjoying the episodes, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's get comfortable, relax, and begin. My high school was the kind where everyone knew everyone, just under 200 kids per grade. A small town vibe where nothing ever really felt dangerous, until it did. 5 years after graduating from Maple Hollow High, we had our class reunion. They held it at a local banquet room just off Main Street. It was small, cozy, the kind of place you'd rent for birthday dinners or retirement parties. I was nervous to go, not because of the event itself, but because of someone who might be there. I didn't want to go alone, so I asked my best friend Lauren to come with me. We've been tight since middle school. She knows everything about me, especially the whole Tyler thing. Tyler was one of those guys who never quite fit into any group. He wasn't athletic, wasn't goth, wasn't a stoner. Just strange. He and I had a brief thing our senior year. We hooked up a few times, but it quickly turned dark. He became obsessive. Sending weird texts. Saying he knew when I got home, what my schedule was. One night, he came to my parents' house and threw rocks at my bedroom window. My dad stormed out in his robe and chased him off with a baseball bat. After that, things went quiet. He drifted off into the background. Most people at school stopped talking to him when they learned what he'd done. He got a bit of a reputation, especially with the girls. I just hoped he wouldn't show up to the reunion. When Lauren and I walked into the venue, we were greeted by familiar faces. Some people had changed a lot, others barely at all. Around 50 classmates came out, which was actually a solid turnout. We chatted, laughed, caught up. It felt good. Normal. Then I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned, and there he was. Tyler. My stomach dropped. He looked the same, just a bit older. Messy hair, that same vacant look in his eyes. He said, "Hey, can we talk?" I said something like, "I hope you're doing okay, but there's really nothing to talk about." I turned to walk away, but he grabbed my arm. "You're seriously still acting like that," he snapped. I yanked my arm free. "Don't touch me." His eyes darted around, and then he backed off. Okay. He shuffled away like he didn't want anyone else to notice. But I noticed. And the moment was burned into me. I couldn't relax the rest of the night. I kept scanning the room for him, making sure we never crossed paths again. Eventually, I saw him standing with one of the guys from his old circle. Then, just like that, he disappeared. I figured he left early. Lauren and I hung out for a bit longer, then headed with some other girls to a nearby dive bar. We stayed for maybe another hour. Then she dropped me off at my place, a small rental home on the edge of town. As I walked up the front steps, I saw a dark SUV pass by slowly. Not speeding. Not parked. Just drifting. It was a black Jeep Cherokee. Now maybe I was being paranoid. But considering the hour, the quiet neighborhood, and what had happened earlier, it felt off. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling. So, I pulled up Tyler's Instagram. It was private. I've got a fake account for stuff like this. I sent a request. He accepted it. No posts showed any cars. That calmed me a little. But I live alone. And my mind kept circling back to that black Jeep. Later that day, Tyler sent me a long DM. It was manipulative and unsettling. He talked about closure and how our story isn't over yet. I blocked him. And that night, at exactly 1:04 a.m., my doorbell rang. Once. Then again. And again. I froze. It rang 5 more times in a row. I tiptoed to the living room window and peeked through the blinds. Nothing. Then the banging started. Heavy, angry fists against the door. Boo! 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 It kept going. For maybe 2 minutes. Then silence. Then another ring. I didn't move. I couldn't breathe. I kept imagining him on the other side, waiting for me to open the door just a crack. Eventually, it stopped. I waited until sunrise to sleep. The next day, I told Lauren everything. Her dad happens to know a retired detective back in town. He offered to help. He came by my place, took screenshots of the old messages and the DM, and said he'd make some calls. That night, Tyler got a very direct phone call from that detective. He told him to stop all contact or it would be considered harassment. Maybe even stalking. So far, it's worked. But sometimes I wonder, what if I hadn't blocked him? What if I had opened the door? People like him, they don't change. The 10-year reunion's coming up. I already know one person I hope won't be on the guest list. Have you ever run into someone from your past who made your skin crawl? I had been seeing this woman named Emily for a few weeks. We'd only gone on 2 dates. We met through a dating app. She was 4 years older than me. Our first date was at a cozy bar just outside town, and the second time, she came out with me and my buddies for drinks on a Friday night. They thought she was, well, polite and quiet. At least, that's what they said at the time. They'd tell me what they really thought later. After that second outing, Emily invited me to her high school reunion. She said she didn't want to go alone. Honestly, after she'd made the effort to meet my friends, I figured it was only fair. The reunion was happening on a random fall Saturday. But it wasn't being hosted by her school. She told me some wealthy guy from her class was throwing it at his home in a town called Cedar Ridge, about 30 minutes from where I lived. Now, I haven't had a high school reunion yet. But I always imagined they'd be in some rented hall or a restaurant. Not at a mansion. This place had a long, winding gated driveway, lined with pine trees. It looked expensive, but strangely quiet. There weren't any cars out front either. I figured maybe the guy had everyone park around the back. But the moment we stepped inside, I felt like every single pair of eyes turned to look at me. Emily was greeted by a few people with long, awkward hugs. Then all their attention snapped toward me. The questions came fast, too fast. What do you do for work? Do you live nearby? Are you close with your family? The tone didn't match the questions. These weren't curious small talk kind of questions. They felt like screening. Emily gently pulled me to another part of the house, where more people were waiting. They asked similar things. But their eyes didn't move. They stared too long. Too deep. There was something off about these people. Emily had told me she was 28. But some of the people here looked mid-30s at best, maybe even older. I whispered, "Aren't these people a little old to be your classmates?" She gave me this half-smile and said, "Some of them didn't age too well." I asked, "You remember everyone here?" She nodded. Then I asked about the host, the guy with the mansion. I was genuinely curious to meet the man throwing this lavish, yet strangely silent, party. She said she hadn't seen him yet. But the longer we stayed, the heavier the room felt. I don't know how else to describe it. There was no music. No laughing. Everyone was dressed too formally, in muted, almost old-fashioned clothes. And no one had a drink in hand. No one looked like they were enjoying themselves. Just standing. Watching. I told Emily I was going to use the bathroom. Truth is, I just needed to get out of that room. I didn't have anything to do with my hands, no drink, no phone signal. Just awkward stares burning into my back. I wandered through the hallways, all lined with paintings that looked too realistic. The lighting was soft, but it flickered in spots like old bulbs in a funeral home. I found the bathroom and locked the door behind me. I didn't even need to go. I just sat on the edge of the bathtub and exhaled. I texted my friends. This party's really weird. Everyone here is staring at me. How do I get Emily to leave early? We'd been there maybe 40 minutes, and still no sign of the mysterious host. Emily texted. "Where are you?" I answered. "Bathroom. Just need a sec." Followed by, "I'm ready to head out soon." She asked, "Why?" I replied, "Everyone's acting strange." Right then, a knock at the door. I jumped a little. I washed my hands and opened it. A guy around my age was waiting. He didn't look like the others. He looked tense, but normal. As I stepped out, he leaned in and whispered, "You should leave. That girl isn't who she says she is." My heart skipped. I asked, "Emily?" He said, "Whatever name she gave you." He then asked, "What did she tell you this party was?" I said, "Her high school reunion." He gave me a dry, almost pitying smirk and said, "Do these people look like they're going to a high school reunion?" And then, "Trust me, leave. Sooner than later." He stepped inside the bathroom and shut the door. I stood frozen. I thought about knocking again, asking him more. But I didn't. Because deep down, I already knew he was right. I turned, kept my head low, and walked straight to the front door. I could feel eyes on me. But I didn't stop. I walked down the gravel path, out through the rusted front gate, and straight to my car. I started the engine and didn't look back. As I turned onto the highway, Emily texted me. "Where'd you go?" I didn't answer. When I got home, I ran her phone number through a lookup site. The name wasn't Emily. It was Claire Foster. The address she had me pick her up from also didn't match. That's when I realized I never actually saw her leave the house. Both times I picked her up, she was already waiting outside on the sidewalk. I finally texted her back. "Had to leave. Sorry." Then I blocked her number. Later, when I told my friends everything, they said they knew something was off. They just didn't want to kill my vibe. One friend even joked, "Dude, were you in a real-life Get Out?" Everyone had theories. Some creepy. Some ridiculous. But when I mentioned the fake name, and the warning from that guy in the hallway, they didn't laugh anymore. The following clips you're about to hear are some truly shocking and unsettling moments captured on GoPro cameras. If you've been listening to my stories for a while, some of these may sound familiar. They were part of a video I had to take down years ago. But now, they're back, and just as spine-chilling. Many urban explorers in the US are drawn to forgotten places, especially old railroad tracks and tunnels. There's something eerie and magnetic about abandoned paths that once carried hundreds of people a day but now sit quiet and crumbling. In many rural towns across America, train routes have been shut down over time. Sometimes it's due to low usage, natural disasters, or changing infrastructure. But even when the trains stop running, the tracks often stay. A few are turned into pedal cart attractions or hiking trails. Most just rust away, overgrown and forgotten. But here's where things get dangerous. Some explorers confuse active train lines with abandoned ones. And that's where this story takes a terrifying turn. This particular footage, now resurfaced, was recorded on a GoPro by 22-year-old Ryan Mitchell, while he and his two friends were exploring what they thought was an old railway tunnel near the edge of Pine Ridge, Colorado. The tunnel, covered in moss and graffiti, looked unused, silent and empty. But then came the sound. A distant rumble. Then the unmistakable horn of a train. Panic hit instantly. The three turned around and sprinted back toward the entrance. You can hear Ryan gasping into the GoPro mic, the horn getting louder behind him. With just seconds to spare, 3, maybe less, they burst out of the tunnel into the open air. What if they had entered a few minutes later? Have you ever wandered into a place you shouldn't have? In a small town tucked between the hills of northern Pennsylvania, two friends, Zach and Tyler, decided to explore an old railroad tunnel late one evening. They didn't know it was still active. With their mountain bikes and a GoPro strapped to Zach's helmet, they rode in, laughing and echoing through the dim, dripping tunnel. But their fun was cut short. A deep rumble shook the ground, followed by the distant blare of a train horn. Panic hit. They turned and raced back toward the fading light of the tunnel's mouth. But Zach hesitated. Instead of running, he tried to save his bike. Those few seconds nearly cost him everything. He cleared the tunnel just in time, barely 3 seconds before the train roared past. What would you have done? Let me tell you about something that'll make your spine tingle next time you're out exploring. In this video, a popular YouTuber heads into an old railroad tunnel somewhere near Pine Creek, a quiet rural town in the Midwest. It was one of those abandoned-looking spots that attract thrill seekers, but what he didn't realize was that the tracks were still in use. Just as he reaches the darkest point in the tunnel, a low rumble begins to echo around him, then the blaring horn of a train. He freezes. Panic kicks in. There's no way to outrun it. But by sheer luck, he's right next to one of those carved outside alcoves, safety niches built into the wall for emergencies like this. He dives in, seconds before the train thunders past, just feet away. It's terrifying to think how often this kind of thing happens. Every year, hundreds of people lose their lives trespassing on active railroad lines, often for a photo or a dare. Now, shifting from man-made danger to the wilderness. There's an old saying about bears. If it's black, fight back. If it's brown, lie down. If it's white, say goodnight. It's pretty straightforward. Black bears? They're usually shy. But if one attacks, you're supposed to stand your ground and fight like your life depends on it, because it does. Brown bears? You play dead and pray it loses interest. Polar bears? Well, you probably won't be telling the story. But then there are rare moments that flip everything upside down. A man named Richard Wesley from northern Minnesota was out bow hunting when he spotted a black bear in the distance. It looked peaceful, minding its business. But once it noticed him, the bear started walking in his direction. Slowly at first, then faster, then suddenly charging. Richard did everything right, made loud noises, waved his arms, but the bear didn't back down. It lunged. Knocked him flat. Claws swinging. The scuffle lasted seconds, but to him it must have felt like forever. Somehow, he fought it off and survived. 15 seconds later, he picked up his phone again. Out of breath. Heart pounding. But smiling. Still alive, he whispered. Ever wondered what you'd do in a moment like that? This clip shows just how unpredictable nature can be, especially when it involves a black bear. The footage was captured by Michael Turner, an experienced hiker scaling Granite Ridge in Colorado. As he climbed with 2 ice axes, another hiker above him accidentally dislodged a chunk of ice. It struck Michael, causing him to lose balance and tumble nearly 100 feet down the icy slope. The video captures his terrifying fall, bouncing off rocks and frozen ledges, before he finally came to a stop. Miraculously, he survived with only a broken ankle. Nearby hikers quickly called for help, and a rescue chopper arrived shortly after. Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Let me tell you what happened to a friend of mine named Jason during his biking trip through the outskirts of East Los Angeles. It was a sunny afternoon, and he was filming the ride on his GoPro, just cruising through neighborhoods that had a bit of a rough reputation, but nothing he hadn't dealt with before. Out of nowhere, a guy on another bike swerved in front of him, pulled out what looked like a pistol, and shouted at him to hand over his backpack. Jason, confused and thrown off by the sudden threat, didn't fully understand what the man was yelling. It wasn't in English, and the guy kept repeating something that sounded like mochila. Jason, thinking fast, tossed his bike toward him, hoping that would satisfy him. But the man didn't want the bike. He wanted the gear in the backpack, Jason's expensive camera setup. The guy started chasing him on foot, gun still in hand. Fortunately, one of Jason's friends riding a bit behind came rushing over. As soon as the gunman noticed the backup and the crowd watching from nearby homes and sidewalks, he backed off and disappeared. Jason got lucky that day. Maybe the gun was fake. Maybe it wasn't. But either way, he made it out shaken, but safe. It started with a BMX bike ad. A guy from Silver Pines, a quiet suburban town in Oregon, listed his bike on Facebook Marketplace. Not long after, he got a message from a girl named Amber. She seemed interested, asked a few questions, and they agreed to meet at a local Chevron gas station just before sunset. The guy, who was wearing a GoPro to document the meetup, just in case, had a weird feeling the moment he arrived. Amber stood by the pump, smiling, but something was off. A man in a white hoodie was approaching fast from the side, not even pretending to be casual. The look in his eyes wasn't right. Then it clicked. This wasn't about the bike. It was a setup. What really sent chills down the guy's spine was Amber's reaction, or rather, the complete lack of it. She didn't look confused or startled when he suddenly turned and started pedaling away. She just stood there, like she expected him to run. The man in the hoodie yelled and chased him. Behind him, another man emerged from behind the air pumps, ready to intercept. But the biker had already gained speed. His legs pumped harder. Tires scraped pavement. Breath hitched in panic. He swerved past the second man and disappeared down the street, heart pounding like thunder in his chest. And then, there's this. Another GoPro clip surfaced, this one from a heated college football game in rural Pennsylvania. In the chaos after a controversial play, a group of local fans, faces covered, fists clenched, stormed a small group of rival supporters. Shoving, yelling, punches thrown in a blur. 3 people were hurt. None seriously. But watching it all from the GoPro's lens, it didn't feel like a brawl. It felt like a ritual. Red circle, red circle, red circle. Let me know when you're ready for the next transformation. Two small aircrafts were slicing through the crisp autumn sky above Pine Hollow, a quiet town nestled in the Midwest. The sun was just beginning to set, painting the clouds orange and gold. Both planes carried groups of skydivers, 9 in total, excited for what was supposed to be a thrilling high-altitude jump. They were preparing for something called a tracking dive, where one plane trails the other closely before the jump. Everything seemed fine at first. But as the second plane came up behind the lead, one of the divers, Zach, noticed something strange. The plane wasn't just following, it was closing in, too fast. Without warning, there was a massive jolt. The sky erupted into chaos. The planes collided mid-air, 12,000 feet above the ground. The force of the collision threw the skydivers into open air. Screams were muffled by wind as they spun away from the wreckage. Miraculously, all 9 of them deployed their parachutes and floated safely to the fields below. The pilot of the lead plane ejected and used his emergency chute. The second pilot somehow managed to glide the battered aircraft back down to a safe landing. But that wasn't the end. Another incident, just months later, would leave a different kind of scar. A small charter plane heading toward Kona, Hawaii, experienced engine failure mid-flight. Caught on a passenger's GoPro, the plane shook violently as the ocean loomed closer outside the windows. Panic should have broken out, but somehow, the passengers remained calm and silent, wide-eyed, clutching each other's hands. The plane crash-landed just off the coast. Everyone scrambled out, clinging to life vests as waves rolled over them. For a moment, it looked like they had all survived. But then, they realized someone wasn't responding. Dr. Lorraine Fielding, a respected public health director from Oahu, had suffered sudden cardiac arrest while floating in the water, her heart failing not from injury, but from the sheer trauma of it all. Even when you survive the impact, sometimes, the fear lingers deeper. Have you ever felt something so terrifying that your body just gave out? Would you trust your heart to stay steady when staring down death? When I was a kid growing up in Pine Hollow, a sleepy little town in Michigan, I had this irrational fear of our basement. I say irrational, but looking back, it kind of wasn't. That basement was big, dark, and creepy, especially for a 6-year-old like me. Right in the center of it was this old L-shaped couch, gray, scratchy fabric, that faced a thick wooden support beam. In front of the couch, we had this clunky box TV where all our video game consoles were hooked up. The whole space had this weird circular layout. You could walk in a loop around the couch through the different corners of the room. One side had a beat-up booth and table from some old diner. Another had a dusty and used bar set up with the door to the laundry room tucked behind it. Across the way, near the stairs, was the doorway to my dad's makeshift home gym. My dad rented out the second floor to a sweet elderly woman named Miss Geraldine, so we lived on the main floor and used the basement as our own little hideaway. My brothers and I would usually hang out down there to play games because Dad liked having the living room to himself. I'm the youngest, 2 older brothers. When this happened, I was probably around 6 or 7. Both of my brothers were off at sleepovers that day. It was just me and Mom at home. Dad was working his night shift at the plant. Normally, I didn't mind the basement when my brothers were around. It felt safer. But that day, walking down the stairs alone, I felt nervous. The basement door always creaked shut unless you propped it open with a shoe or something. That slow, heavy sound of it closing behind me? It made me feel like I was getting sealed off from the rest of the house. I sat alone on that couch, controller in hand, playing whatever pixelated game was hot back then. But I kept hearing little noises. You know, creaks in the pipes, the sound of something shifting in the shadows near the laundry room. I'd pause the game and just stare into the dark corners, heart pounding. Most of the time, it was nothing, maybe the water heater clanking. But then I heard something different. It wasn't mechanical. It was the sound of something small falling and bouncing, like a rubber ball or a bottle cap. I froze. Then I jumped off the couch and raced up the stairs yelling, "Mom! There's someone down there!" She didn't freak out. She crouched beside me, rubbed my back, and asked what I heard. I told her exactly, and she gave me a soft smile and said, "Honey, it's probably just something falling off the dryer." To reassure me, she walked back down with me. I clutched her hand while she opened the laundry room door and turned on the light. We both peered in. Nothing. Just a cold room with the usual stuff stacked in the corners. She shut the door and said gently, "See? No one's here." That helped. She went back upstairs to finish making dinner, and I returned to my game. Some time passed. I don't remember exactly how much. Maybe 20 minutes? It was dark outside now. The basement had these two tiny rectangular windows, but they didn't do much once the sun was down. Down there, it might as well have been midnight. I kept playing, until I heard the furnace kick on inside the laundry room, but way louder than usual. It almost sounded angry. I turned toward the laundry room. The door was open. I stared at it for a long moment. The room beyond was pitch black. I couldn't see a thing past the threshold. I didn't want to go near it. But I also didn't want to keep playing with it wide open like that. I stood, heart racing, and slowly crept over. My hands were shaking. I didn't want to look inside. I didn't want to flip the switch. I just wanted the door shut. So, I gathered every bit of courage I had, and charged at it. I slammed it closed and sprinted back to the couch like something might grab me from behind. Back on the couch, I tried to calm down. I didn't even question how that door opened again after Mom had shut it. I just told myself, maybe it didn't latch. And then I heard a man's voice. From behind me. At first, my brain rejected it. Like, that didn't just happen, right? But then I turned. And there he was. Sitting at the booth in the far corner, like he'd always been there. A sickly-looking man. Pale. Hair stringy and thin. He had one arm rested on the table, the other hand propping up his head. He looked at me with sunken eyes and said, "My God, look how much you've grown." I couldn't move. I couldn't blink. My mouth fell open. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. I just stared. He stood. His movements were slow and stiff, his body twisted in this strange, hunched posture like his spine had bent the wrong way. And then he said something that haunts me to this day. "Your mom won't let me see you kids." That's when I found my voice. I screamed like I never had before. I leapt off the couch and bolted for the stairs, shouting Moem. Moem, the whole way. I slammed the basement door shut and locked it, still screaming, tears running down my face. "There's a man down there!" I shouted. Mom turned from the stove, and her face went white. She looked terrified. She grabbed the phone and called 911 immediately. I barely remember the minutes that followed. It's like everything blurred together. But I do remember the sirens. And the police officers entering our home, sweeping the basement. I waited with Mom in the den. One officer stayed with us while the others checked downstairs. Eventually, they found him. It was my uncle. My mom's brother. The one we never talked about. I'd never met him before. My parents had cut him out of our lives years earlier. He'd gone to prison for child abuse, and Mom never let him near us after that. She didn't even speak his name. He had broken into the house and had been hiding down there. For how long? We don't know. But I still remember the way he said it. "Look how much you've grown." And I wonder, how many times had he been watching me from the dark? before I tell you what happened, you should know I never really knew his face. The last time I saw him, I was just a baby. He vanished from my life after that. Went back to prison for another 4 years on yet another sex charge. We don't know where he is now. It was mid-October, right before Halloween. That year, we were all getting together for my cousin Andy's birthday, October 15th. He was turning 12. Uncle John and Aunt Melissa were throwing him a party at their place in Silver Springs, Virginia. They've got a big house, and with a family as large as ours, gatherings get loud fast. Since it was still warm, most of the party moved outside to the backyard. Andy and I were the same age. My older brother, Chase, was 14 and still liked hanging out with us for games like hide and seek. Some of our other cousins, even the older ones, joined in too. We'd split into teams and set time limits for finding each other. If someone spotted you, you had a chance to make a break for the backyard and call safe before getting tagged. The whole house was fair game except Aunt Melissa and Uncle John's bedroom. Honestly, their place was perfect for hiding. Hallways, closets, crawl spaces, you name it. But the basement was the crown jewel. Especially Aunt Melissa's design room. She's a fashion designer and that room was something else. Mannequins everywhere, some full body, others just torsos on stands. Racks of fabrics, hanging lights, even a green screen and camera gear. It always felt like walking into a movie set. That day, Chase and I were on the hiding team. He ducked somewhere in the main basement, and I slipped into the fashion room. I grabbed 2 throw blankets from the ottoman near the stairs. I planned to cover myself with one and toss the other over a mannequin to throw people off. I figured someone would rip the blanket off thinking it was me, and I'd get a good laugh. I tucked myself under a desk in the corner, pulling the blanket over me like a fort. Then I waited. That's how it always went. If your hiding spot was solid, the biggest part of the game was just staying still. Eventually, I heard stomping and laughter echoing from the other part of the basement. Chase was being chased, shouting and running upstairs. Probably trying to reach the yard. Then it got quiet. Really quiet. I waited another 10 minutes, maybe more. I started to get uncomfortable. My legs were cramping up, and honestly, I was just bored. Finally, I heard Chase come back down. He called my name and told me they were serving food outside. The game was over. I sprang out from under the desk and made a beeline to the backyard. I was starving. There were long tables set up with trays of catered food, and family buzzing everywhere. At some point, I ended up talking to Aunt Melissa about her work, and that's when it hit me. I left the 2 blankets in her fashion room. More importantly, I left one draped over a mannequin. She's super protective of her workspace, and I knew she wouldn't be thrilled. So, after using the bathroom, I headed back down. The basement was empty now. I flicked on the light in the fashion room and immediately noticed something was off. The blanket I'd thrown over the mannequin wasn't on it anymore. Instead, it was covering something else entirely. It looked like another mannequin, but this one was sitting down. That didn't make sense. I didn't remember any mannequins that could sit. I stepped closer. The shape under the blanket shifted. It was breathing. And then I noticed the smell. A sour, musty odor that hadn't been there before. Someone was under that blanket. I half laughed and said, "All right, who is that?" No answer. My stomach turned. I looked down, hoping to see a familiar pair of shoes. But instead, I saw bare feet. Dark-skinned, calloused, unmoving. And no one at our party was black. I backed away, fast. My heart was hammering. I bolted upstairs and ran straight outside. "Uncle John! Call the police! There's someone in the basement!" Everyone froze. Panic rippled through the backyard. My uncle and a few of the older cousins rushed inside with me trailing behind. We headed straight to the fashion room. But by the time we got there, the blanket was on the floor. Whoever had been under it was gone. I kept saying I wasn't making it up, that I saw him. The feet. The movement. The smell. Everything. The house was torn apart room by room. Every closet, every crawlspace, even the attic. Nothing. Eventually, Uncle John called the cops. He didn't treat it like some prank or overreaction. He took me seriously. The police showed up. Lights flashing. Officers inside, searching. Neighbors came out onto their porches, craning to see what was happening. But the man was gone. They never found anyone. And even though most of my family believed me, especially Uncle John, I still wished they had seen him. I wanted them to know what I saw wasn't in my head. Later, someone pointed out that during big parties, we usually left the doors unlocked. People came and went all day, so it wasn't unusual. It's not hard to imagine someone walking in off the street. Maybe a homeless person looking for warmth. That would explain the smell. Maybe. But something about it still doesn't sit right with me. That image of the blanket slowly rising and falling with shallow breathing, the way those feet didn't move, it still plays in my head sometimes, especially around October. And I keep wondering, what if he wasn't just passing through? What if he'd been there longer than we thought? Let me tell you a story I've never forgotten. It happened when I was 9. I'm 25 now, but even after all these years, I still think about that winter in Silver Pine, a quiet little town tucked deep into the forests of Oregon. We were visiting my great-grandfather for Christmas break. That year was different. My mom had recently divorced my dad over the summer, and for the first time, her new boyfriend came with us. Grandpa's place was nestled on the edge of town, a small 2-story wooden house surrounded by thick evergreens, the kind that creak when the wind moves just right. I loved that house. I still miss it. A couple days into our stay, we were surprised by my aunt, uncle, and cousins. They had driven over 10 hours to spend the holidays with us, even though they'd said work wouldn't allow it. My cousins and I were really close back then, so having them show up like that was the best gift I could have asked for. That night, my uncle and his wife, along with my cousin who lived next door to Grandpa, came over. The adults settled into the living room, sipping wine and talking about grown-up stuff. So the kids, me, my cousin Sam, same age as me, Evan, 12, and Kennedy, 10, decided to play what we called Monster in the Basement. The rules were simple. Sam and Evan would hide in the basement with the lights off and act like monsters. Kennedy and I would go down after 2 minutes and try to find them by following their creepy noises. If they found us first, they'd jump out and chase us back up to the top of the stairs, which was our safe zone. Looking back now, it was kind of silly. But at the time, it was scary in all the right ways. So that night, Sam and Evan went down first. Kennedy and I waited the 2 minutes, then crept down the wooden stairs. The basement was pitch black, except for the dull glow of the pellet stove and a sliver of moonlight coming through a small window. It was dead silent. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. Then, bam, the boys jumped out. We screamed, they chased us, we laughed. Total chaos. We raced back upstairs, hearts pounding, already planning round 2. We did the countdown again. This time, I led the way. We'd barely made it halfway down the stairs when we heard a loud thud. It sounded like someone had slammed a fist into the wall. I flinched. Kennedy whispered, "That had to be Evan." We kept moving, but then I saw something. There was a figure. Outside the window. I instinctively threw my arm out to stop Kennedy. She grumbled, "What are you doing?" I just pointed. She followed my gaze and froze. Standing just outside the basement window was a tall, shadowy figure. completely still. Kennedy whispered, "Sam? Evan? Stop playing. There's someone outside." Her voice trembled. Sam's voice echoed from the dark, "You're lying. You're just scared." I clenched my fists. "No, seriously. Look. The window above the TV." Just then, Sam and Evan crawled out from under the ping-pong table. Evan smirked and said, "It's probably Uncle Ryan having a smoke." But I knew Uncle Ryan always smoked on the front porch. You could hear the door squeak when he opened it, and he liked sitting on the steps under the porch light. I told Evan that. Then Sam chimed in, "It's probably Grandpa. You know how he is always checking on stuff. If you're so worried," he added, "go upstairs and look." So I did. But I pretended to just be searching for a snack or something, not wanting to seem scared. Everyone was in the living room. Uncle Ryan, Grandpa, even the dog. No one was outside. My stomach twisted. I rushed back down, now shaking. "Guys," I said, trying not to panic, "everyone is upstairs. There is someone outside." Sam and Evan's faces dropped. They weren't smirking anymore. Kennedy began to tear up. I whispered, "Don't cry. Don't make noise." We all huddled at the top of the basement stairs, trying to figure out what to do next. Evan mumbled something ridiculous about grabbing a bat or throwing stuff at the window. None of us wanted to tell the adults. After 5 tense minutes, we finally worked up the nerve to go back down. The figure was gone. We figured whoever it was had wandered off. Still rattled, we decided to ditch the monster game and just play ping pong instead. We flipped the switch, and the basement lights flickered on. That's when we noticed something weird. The small window near the old TV was cracked open. Had it always been like that? I stepped closer. Something didn't feel right. I turned to look at the couch in the far corner of the room. There was a man sitting there. He looked to be in his 40s. Scruffy. Pale. Just sitting there, in my grandpa's favorite armchair, staring straight at us. His head slightly tilted, lips curling into the most unnerving smile I've ever seen. None of us moved. We were frozen, breathless. Then, he stood up. I screamed, "Run!" We bolted up the stairs, slammed the door shut, and sprinted into the living room, screaming and crying. "There's a man downstairs!" Everyone jumped up. My Uncle Ryan, who used to be a cop, grabbed Grandpa's old hunting rifle and rushed downstairs. He was back up in minutes. No one was there. But the snow outside told a different story. Footprints led from the basement window to the driveway, where they disappeared into the woods. Nothing was missing. Nothing broken. The man hadn't taken anything. He had just sat there. We didn't leave our parents' sides the rest of the night. I curled up next to my mom, and even though I was way too old for it, I slept in her bed that night. We never played Monster in the Basement again. My grandpa passed in October 2017. I miss him. I miss his house. But I still can't go near a basement alone. Not at home. Not at a friend's house. Not even in daylight. Because sometimes, when it's dark and quiet, and I walk past a window, I swear I still feel that man's eyes on me. Have you ever seen something that made you freeze like that? Something you couldn't explain, but will never forget? Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. When my cousin Jake and I were in our early 20s, we went on a few camping trips around the Rocky Mountains. This happened when I was 22 and he was 23, somewhere deep in the Route National Forest in northern Colorado. It was my first time camping there, but Jake had been several times before. We usually took off during the week since our jobs gave us weekdays off sometimes, and camping then meant fewer people and less noise. I always let Jake take the lead on these trips. He was the Eagle Scout, definitely not me. We parked near a small picnic area and headed into the forest from there. After about 15 minutes hiking through towering pines and thick underbrush, we found a clearing just big enough for our 2 tents, a portable stove, and a campfire spot. Jake was quick setting up camp. He pitched his tent in just a few minutes while I struggled for what felt like forever with mine. That was the last time I tried pitching a tent in the wilderness, honestly. Then we built a ring of stones for the fire and gathered wood. Jake had brought some fire starters and a lighter, so maybe we cheated a little, but it worked. By the time the sun was dipping behind the mountains, we had a fire going and Jake was grilling steaks and burgers. He always went all out with the food, and he was a good cook, so I trusted him to handle dinner. Of course, we had our bear spray nearby, just in case the smell attracted a curious black bear. Jake always said the real danger in places like this wasn't animals but other people. As we ate, we cracked open some beers and played classic rock from a small speaker. If you've never camped, you might not know how perfect that feeling is, sitting in the quiet woods with a fire, good food, good music, and a friend to talk to. After dark settled in, we played cards on a little folding table we'd brought. We started with poker, then switched to Uno. That's when we heard it. A faint humming, soft footsteps moving beyond the tree line in the blackness. I paused the music on my phone so the speaker went silent. The sounds were clear now. Someone was walking through the woods, humming, and creeping close to our camp. Jake told me to find the flashlight. I fumbled around, but by the time I switched it on, the sounds had faded away. I asked if this was something to worry about. Jake nodded, saying it was strange for anyone to be that deep in the forest at night, especially near an active campsite. We were both a little shaken but tried to brush it off. The music came back on, but quieter this time. Suddenly, a big stick landed right in the middle of our fire ring, making us both jump. It hadn't fallen from a tree, someone had thrown it. Jake shouted something like, "If you're out there messing with us, get a life and leave." Then we heard footsteps walking away into the dark. I suggested packing up and moving somewhere else, but Jake said no way, too dangerous to break camp in the dark. We both had bear spray, so he told me to keep mine close when we went to sleep. Still, all night long, we heard strange noises, branches snapping, rustling sounds no animal should make. It felt like someone, or maybe more than one person, was circling us in the shadows. Eventually, we had to try sleeping. We agreed to take turns keeping watch. Jake took first shift, saying he'd read a book while I tried to rest. Waking in the cold wilderness is normal, your body adjusts to the chill and strange sounds, but something woke me fully in the middle of the night. At first, I was foggy, barely awake. Then I saw a face looking into my tent. It looked like Jake's. I rubbed my eyes, thinking maybe it was just the dark playing tricks. "Is it my turn?" I mumbled. The face stayed still, then the zipper zipped shut quickly. I sat up, heart pounding, and listened. Footsteps faded away. I called out, "Jake?" No answer. I unzipped my tent and stepped outside. The fire was out. Jake wasn't around. I went over to his tent and zipped it open. There he was, fast asleep. A chill ran down my spine. I shook him awake, whispering about someone at our camp. After a moment, he woke up, grabbed his bear spray, and said he must have nodded off reading. Jake suggested I sleep in his tent that night, but I'd need my sleeping bag. As I ran to get it, I heard the humming again, low and eerie in the dark. We zipped up the tent tight, cans of bear spray by our sides. Honestly, in those moments, I wished a bear would come charging out of the trees and scare whoever was out there away. Hours passed slowly. When I finally woke Jake, dawn was just breaking. We packed everything up and headed back to the car. The woods didn't feel safe anymore. We could have tried camping somewhere else, but neither of us wanted to. That night haunted us both. 6 years later, Jake still asks about camping, but I haven't been able to shake the fear. Who was out there? Why were they watching us? The memory of that face in the dark, staring into my tent, it's like something from a nightmare. Maybe I'll never go camping again. Hey everyone! I put a lot of effort and heart into creating these videos just for you. If you're enjoying the content, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a quick comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps me motivated to bring more awesome videos your way. I never imagined how our weekend would turn out when my friends and I rented a beach house in Maine. It was the four of us packed tight in a small SUV driving up the coast. The house sat right on the shoreline. The road was quiet, with the cold Atlantic stretching out across the street, and behind the house, the sand met the ocean. There were a few large, grand homes nearby, but ours was one of the simpler, weathered cottages. It had 4 bedrooms, one for each of us. The houses were spaced far apart, giving us a sense of privacy. While we unloaded the car out front, not a single car passed by. The interior was plain but neat, and the owners had decorated with a strong seaside theme. There was even an old, faded surfboard propped in the corner of the living room behind the TV. From the living room, the windows looked out onto the back porch, just a couple of steps down to the sandy beach. The view was stunning. We all picked our rooms, and I ended up with one facing the ocean. After settling in, we went straight out onto the beach. We swam in the chilly water and tossed a football around for hours. It felt like the entire beach was ours, except for an older couple far down near the rocks. Later, we grabbed dinner in the nearby town, then hit a few local bars. When we took an Uber back, night had fallen. Drunk and restless, we went outside to fool around, playing football under the pale moonlight. While running to catch the ball after missing a pass, I spotted something moving in the water. The moonlight reflecting off the waves made it just visible. I muttered, "What the hell is that?" It was a figure standing waist-deep in the ocean. My friends saw it too. It was strange past midnight, but maybe some local just liked a late swim. We retreated to the porch with beers until tiredness set in. One by one, everyone went inside. John and I lingered last. Every so often, I glanced toward the water, and then I noticed someone standing on the beach. They faced our house. It gave me chills. Maybe a neighbor? I didn't want to be rude, but I wondered if it was the same person in the water. We tried to ignore it, but John kept watching. After a while, he said they were still standing there. I stood and called out, "Hey, is everything okay?" John asked why I did it. Honestly, I wasn't sure what I expected. There was no reply. We were creeped out and went inside. Travis and Liam were already asleep, passed out from the night's drinks. John and I decided to call it 2, hoping for a full day tomorrow. It must have been around 12:30 or 1 a.m., early for us, but the day had been long. After brushing my teeth, I looked out my window one last time. That's when the feeling hit harder. Someone stood right in front of the back porch, facing the house. I could swear they were looking straight at my window. The figure looked like a man, with a broad frame. It was definitely the same person from earlier. I called John, but no answer. I rushed to his room and knocked until he came out. I led him to my window, but now the person was gone. I swore they had been there just moments ago. John believed me. Neither of us wanted to go outside to check. I peeked one more time, and when I saw nothing, I closed the blinds. But as I lay in bed, restless and turning from side to side, a sudden sound froze me, a soft, steady knocking on my bedroom window. My heart dropped. I stayed completely still. Then, a second, lighter set of knocks came. I didn't dare pull up the blinds. I nearly shouted, "Who's there?" but stopped myself. Instead, I sprinted to the living room, yelling for everyone to wake up. One by one, they appeared, rubbing sleep from their eyes. No one was at the window. We all went out onto the porch and switched on the lights. We scanned the beach and the sides of the house. No one was there. John and I told the others what they missed while asleep. We left the porch lights on all night. The next day, John and I visited the two closest neighbors, asking if they'd noticed strange knocks on their doors or windows. One man shared a creepy story from the week before. Someone had knocked on his door in the dead of night, refusing to say who it was. He never answered. I don't know if it was connected, but if it was, that made everything feel even more unsettling. We spent the rest of the day exploring the beach and nearby towns, hitting a few bars. That night, nothing happened. We left the next morning. I still wonder what I would have seen if I'd lifted the blinds. What do you think was out there that night? When I was 9 years old, something happened that still feels like a shadow over my childhood. One night, I was home alone. My parents usually didn't leave me by myself for long, maybe just to grab some groceries or run a quick errand. That night, I was upstairs in my room, lost in my favorite game, Metroid Prime on my old GameCube. I was obsessed with that game back then. Suddenly, I heard the phone ringing downstairs. My mom always told me to answer it if it rang, especially if it was her calling. So, I hurried down the creaky wooden stairs, and just as the phone rang for the fourth time, I picked up. The caller ID showed my mom's cell number. A voice said softly, "Sweetheart, can you come outside and help with the groceries?" But something felt off. It wasn't quite right. I said, "Mom?" The voice replied, "Yes?" But the way she said it made my skin crawl. It wasn't my mom's usual tone. Even at 9, I knew her voice well. It was strange, too sweet, too forced. I asked, "Why do you sound like that?" The voice answered, "Like what, sweetheart?" Then the call ended. My mom never said sweetheart, especially not twice like that. When the phone rang again, her number showed up once more. I ignored it. My heart was pounding. Minutes later, the phone rang a third time. This time, the caller ID was a different number. I answered, and a man's voice whispered, "Hey James, I know this sounds crazy, but it's your dad. I'm outside. I have a lot to explain." I barely managed to say, "What?" before hanging up. My dad died when I was 3. I never knew him. The phone kept ringing, and I ignored every call. I couldn't call my mom back because whoever had her phone was still out there. Then came the knocking. At the front door. Loud, insistent. My mom wouldn't knock, she had a key. I peeked around the kitchen wall. Outside, a man was calling my name. "It's your dad," he said. He rang the doorbell and started trying to open the door. Fear took over. I did something no kid should ever have to do. I grabbed the phone and called 911. The operator's voice was calm, asking questions and telling me to hide in a room with a lock. The bathroom was nearby, so I slipped in and turned off the lights. I heard someone struggling to open the windows. The scraping and rattling were so close, like they could reach in any second. Then the noise moved from window to window. I think they tried every door and window around the house. If anything had been unlocked, this story might have ended very differently. I'm sure there were 2 people, a man and a woman. Both could have been outside, waiting for me to come out. Finally, the operator told me the police had arrived at the front door. I opened it slowly and handed the phone to the officer, still shaking. They searched the house and asked me about my mom and if anyone wanted to hurt us. I told them she was probably just out grocery shopping, and I didn't know anyone who would do this. Later, my mom came home with my little sister, panic in her eyes when she saw the police cars outside. My mom's phone was stolen. It was an old Nokia flip phone, but the worst part was the wallpaper, a picture of my mom holding me and my sister. Someone out there saw that and knew exactly who we were. I don't know how they knew my name or our address, but it must have been stored on that phone. After that night, my mom never left me alone after dark. Not until I was much older. Sometimes, I still wonder who were those people outside. And what would have happened if I'd answered that door? Have you ever felt something was wrong, but couldn't explain why? Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. When I moved out of my parents' house and into my own apartment in the small town of Pine Lake, I had a lot of stuff to get rid of. I never liked Craigslist. It always felt sketchy to me, especially after hearing some creepy stories. So, I decided to list most of my things on Facebook Marketplace. There were things that wouldn't fit in my new place and stuff my dad wanted gone from his house, my weight set, some old toys from childhood, book collections, and a bunch of other random things. The weight set was the priciest item. It included a barbell, a plate rack, and a bunch of weight plates. I was asking $340 for it, which seemed fair. But surprisingly, I wasn't getting many responses. A few people messaged asking if it was still available, but then never followed up. Then, a few days after posting it, a guy named Joe reached out. His profile picture was grainy, a guy wearing a fishing hat holding up a fish. His profile was locked down. I couldn't see much, no friends list, just that we shared 3 mutual friends. All 3 were girls from Pine Lake. Joe's last name matched a Joe I knew who used to date a girl I was somewhat friendly with. I figured it was probably him, especially since I knew that Joe liked fishing. After telling him the weight set was still available, he asked, "Great, when can I pick it up?" I was surprised he didn't try to haggle at all. I said I was free any night after 7. He said he could come by around 11 p.m. after work. That was late, but I figured it worked for his schedule. Just to be friendly, I asked, "Hey, you used to date Gina, right?" I saw the typing bubble pop up briefly, then disappear, and no reply for a few minutes. Finally, he answered, "Yeah." I thought that pause was odd, but maybe he just wasn't expecting that question. I said, "I knew I recognized your name, LOL." He read it but didn't reply for another half hour. Then he messaged, "Yeah, LOL. Can you send me your address? I'll let you know when I'm coming." I sent the address. He read it but didn't respond for several hours. When I got home from work around 6 p.m., I went to the gym and got back around 7:30, still waiting for any word from Joe. Finally, he asked for my phone number. I gave it to him, and seconds later I got a text from a local number. I have an iPhone, so when I texted back, the message showed up green. Usually, I'd see that as a red flag, maybe a scam, since most people I know have iPhones. But I didn't think much of it because I thought I already knew him. He said he'd be over in a few hours. So I went about my evening. It was almost 11 p.m., and I waited patiently for his call or text. At 11:30, he texted, "I'm here, come out." I looked out my front window and saw a dark-colored car parked on the street. I tried calling him to ask for help carrying the weights out, but he declined the call. Then he texted again, "Yo, come out." I replied, "I see you. You can come in, I just need help with the weights, they're heavy." He texted back, "Nah, gotta see if you're straight first." I froze for a moment, trying to understand what that even meant. This wasn't the kind of message I'd expect from the white, fishing-loving Joe I knew. I called one more time, but he rejected the call again. That's when suspicion set in. I messaged Gina and the other mutual friends we had on Facebook. Angela was the first to respond, "OMG, that's a catfish. Someone's pretending to be him." When I asked why, she said the fake profile must have had a different name when it added her. I looked outside again. The car was still there. Someone was lurking. I had no idea what they planned or why. I couldn't reach the real Joe. His real profile wasn't public at all. I kept my door locked tight and stopped replying. I turned off the living room light, cracked the blinds just a little, and swore I saw a figure hiding behind the bushes by my front porch. I watched as the car honked its horn, then saw the figure dash back to the vehicle. The car sped off. Instead of relief, I felt gut-wrenching fear, not just for what I'd narrowly avoided but because those people now had my address. The fake Facebook profile disappeared the next day after many people reported it. Joe confirmed he had nothing to do with it. Someone must have stolen his pictures and name to scam people around town. But I wasn't convinced it was just a random scam. Days later, I got this text, "Hey yo bitch, watch your back. We know where you live. Keep trying to talk to my girl, see what happens, man. We'll fuck you up right outside your crib. Sleep with one eye open, pussy. We watching." I told the police, but it felt like a low-priority case. I never tried talking to anyone's girl. At the time, I was seeing someone pretty seriously, so I think it's connected. I don't know who they are or what would have happened if I'd opened that door. Since then, I've lived with a low-level fear in my new apartment. Thankfully, no more threats have come. But I still always check outside my windows before heading out at night. It had to be the fall of 2018. I was trying to sell this old pinball machine that my family had kept since I was a kid. It wasn't some high-end arcade machine worth thousands, but it definitely had some value, probably a few $100s. It had been gathering dust in my parents' attic for years, so I figured I'd sell it before one of my sisters got the same idea. I didn't want anyone else to know about it because then I'd have to split the money. So, I decided to list it online while my family was away on a weekend trip, one I couldn't join because of work. I know, I was being a bit sneaky, but sometimes you just have to do what you have to do. My parents' house is in a quiet neighborhood just outside of Silver Springs, a nice little town but not gated or anything fancy. I put the pinball machine up on Facebook Marketplace for $200. The next day, I got a message from an account with no profile picture, someone named Jasmine, who said she was interested. She offered $175, and I agreed. We set a time for her to come by, but when the time came, she didn't show up. She kept texting me, "I'll be there soon, I'll be there soon." It was getting late, and I had work the next morning. I asked if she'd be there by 11 p.m. at the latest. She said 11:30. I suggested maybe tomorrow would be better, but she insisted she was already on her way. So, I stayed up waiting. At 11:45, she finally messaged that she was outside. I went to the front door and saw a car parked in the driveway. But what I wasn't ready for was seeing all 4 doors open and 4 people step out. 1 woman and 3 guys. I messaged Jasmine, "Are you with others?" She stopped answering after that. I watched as the 4 of them walked up to my door. I kept the storm door locked tight. The guys looked big and rough, and all of them gave off a bad vibe. When they got close, I asked, "Are you Jasmine?" The woman said through the glass, "Yeah." I told her, "I can't let all of you in. My parents are asleep." I was obviously lying. Jasmine, or whoever she was, started trying to open the door, yelling, "What are you talking about?" When she realized it was locked, she knocked hard on the glass. I decided to shut the main door. I could hear them yelling outside for a while, banging the doorbell over and over. One of the guys, maybe more, started shouting insults and curse words through the door. I was glad I hadn't let them in. These weren't people I wanted in my parents' house, especially when I was alone. That's when I knew this whole thing was a terrible idea. Their voices echoed on the front porch for about 10 minutes after I shut the door. I went upstairs to my little brother's room. The window there looks right out over the driveway, and I saw one of the guys peeing on the empty driveway. No cars were there, which made it even worse. The woman shouted something at me as they finally walked away, but I didn't catch what she said. I just thanked whatever was watching over me when their car finally pulled out. I went back upstairs to try to sleep, but I couldn't shake the feeling. Hours after I'd gotten into bed, wide awake now, I heard a crash downstairs. It was unmistakably a window breaking. I jumped up but stopped myself from running. Instead, I quietly crept to the door. The door was already locked. I tiptoed back to my bed with my phone in hand, ready to call 911. For some stupid reason, I waited until I heard more noise before dialing. That's when I heard footsteps, fast, coming up the stairs. I started dialing and felt like I was about to throw up. The footsteps outside my door weren't even trying to be quiet. I whispered everything to the dispatcher. Time seemed to slow down. I hid under my bed as they ransacked the house. They were in and out in less than 5 minutes, long before the police arrived. The backyard window was smashed. They stole things from almost every room. Ironically, the pinball machine wasn't touched. After that, I got a police report number, made an appointment to talk with detectives, and told them everything, including the Facebook account of the Jasmine girl. I even exaggerated a little, saying someone in the house had threatened me. I figured if I said I was threatened, the police would take it more seriously. To my surprise, they did. The detectives traced the Facebook account to a woman living a few towns over in a rougher part of town. With a search warrant, they raided her house and found a lot of stuff stolen from my parents' home. The woman had planned the whole thing and had brought those 3 men with her. All of them got charged with burglary. Most of the stolen items were recovered. I'm sure some things never made it back, but nothing important enough to come up later. Honestly, saying I'd been threatened might have been what made the cops take it seriously. But maybe I'm wrong. This story is about a night that started off just like any other, but turned into something I'll never forget. I hope it helps you relax and maybe even sparks a thought about what might be lurking just out of sight. My family was furious at first when I told them about the plan, but eventually, they came around. I was hunting on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace for a new phone. This was a few years back, so I was looking for something like an iPhone 7 or so. Phones still had those home buttons then. I came across a listing that caught my eye. It was pretty plain, just said iPhone for sale, brand new, around $300. It sounded like a steal back then. The seller, a guy named Melvin, seemed honest enough in our messages. He told me the phone was factory unlocked and still sealed in the box. He even sent a video showing the unopened packaging. We talked about where to meet, and though his listed location was close to me, he texted later that he'd moved about an hour north. I wasn't thrilled, but this deal was too good to pass up. I asked a few friends if anyone wanted to come along for the ride, mostly to keep me company. My friend Martina said yes on the condition that I'd buy her dinner afterward. Melvin gave me an address for a police station about an hour away, saying he only met buyers there to avoid scams. That actually made me feel a bit safer. So, around 8:30 p.m. on a Friday night, I picked up Martina, and we hit the road. Having Martina with me made the drive more fun, and after the meetup, we figured we'd go out and enjoy the night. As we got off the highway, the area grew quiet and remote. Thick woods surrounded us, with the occasional house or building here and there. We arrived at the police station's parking lot, but no one was there besides empty police cars. We circled the building a few times, looking for Melvin or his black Altima. I called him, and he said his car had broken down on a lonely road about 10 minutes away, deep in the woods. He asked if I could come help jumpstart it, said he had jumper cables. Martina was shaking her head while I was on the call. I wasn't thrilled about the idea either, but after driving an hour already, I didn't want to turn back empty-handed. We drove to the spot, a pitch-black road framed by dense trees. Up ahead, headlights flickered. A black car sat on the roadside, but no one was visible inside or nearby. Martina whispered for me to keep driving, and I agreed. It felt too eerie, no streetlights, no houses, just thick woods all around. It was the perfect place for someone to fake a breakdown and lure you in. I passed the car, and right away, Melvin called me again, asking why I didn't stop. I ignored the calls. Martina, ever the optimist, laughed it off and said I owed her that dinner. We found a small diner nearby, quiet for a Friday night. Just as we were settling in with coffee, a man wearing a worn navy hoodie walked in and sat at the bar. He kept glancing our way but said nothing. When he ordered coffee, his voice was unmistakable, Melvin's voice. My heart skipped. I told Martina we had to leave immediately. I asked the waitress for our check quietly, and as she handed it over, the man looked right at me. I didn't wait for an explanation and we rushed out. Back in the car, Martina said, "He's coming." I looked back to see Melvin walking toward the door. I floored it out of the parking lot. A black car stayed behind, probably the one we saw earlier. I drove fast, but then a warning light popped up, low tire pressure. I pulled over and checked. Sure enough, the tire was slashed. We had to swap in the spare, which took some time. If you're wondering, yes, I still bought Martina dinner that night. Now, we tell this story as a crazy adventure. But honestly, it's terrifying how close we came to falling right into that trap. What do you think might have happened if we stopped for him? Have you ever been in a situation where something just felt off? There's a word for the fear of the woods, xylophobia. It's something many people feel at least a little bit, and honestly, it's not hard to understand why. Being out alone in a forest at night stirs a deep, natural fear inside us, something wired into our brains to keep us safe. That fear comes from the darkness itself or what might be hiding in it, wild animals, sure, but sometimes something even more unsettling, other people. These are stories caught on camera of campers who realized they might not be as alone as they thought. Take this clip, for example. A group of friends had set up camp just outside a small town called Pine Hollow, a quiet place nestled among thick woods in Oregon. They were sitting around the fire, drinking and laughing, the cold autumn wind rustling the leaves around them. Then, from somewhere not too far off, strange noises started, at first, loud bangs, like someone hitting wood hard, then these eerie, guttural sounds. The friends exchanged nervous glances as the sounds grew closer and more intense. One of them, Michael, pulled out his phone to record. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. "Sarah, grab the flashlight. We need to get Trevor up. Austin, get the keys. Everyone, back to the truck, now." As you can hear in the video, the bangs soon gave way to strange, animal-like growls and calls. There's definitely something human about those sounds, but the strength and volume are wild, especially knowing how muffled things get on a phone mic. One call sounds nearer than the other, like it's coming from two different spots. And those bangs, they're not your usual forest noises. They're heavy and fast, almost like drumming on the trees. But why would anyone be banging drums deep in the woods at night? It's hard to say. Whatever was out there, the group did the smart thing, they packed up fast and got out of those woods as quickly as they could. What would you have done if you heard those sounds? Have you ever felt that chill of not knowing what's really lurking just beyond the firelight? Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. In this next story, a man named Ethan is sitting by his campfire at a small campsite near Silver Springs, a quiet town nestled deep in the forests of Oregon. It's late at night, the kind of hour when the world feels still and strange sounds echo through the trees. Suddenly, he hears something moving far off in the darkness. Curious and a little uneasy, Ethan grabs his flashlight and steps into the pitch-black woods. The only light comes from the shaky beam cutting through the thick shadows. Imagine being here, the cold wind rustling through the leaves, the creaking of old branches overhead. This forest is one of the eeriest places I've ever been, and tonight, Ethan has to spend the whole night here. He mentions how the whole setting reminds him of the Blair Witch Project, that feeling of being completely alone, watched, and lost. And just moments after saying that, something happens. A sudden, sharp voice cuts through the silence. "Hey! I see you." The voice is high-pitched, almost like a child's. Ethan pauses, unsure if it's just another camper playing a prank. But he knows these woods well, having camped here many times before, and he's never seen a soul out here at night. If it really was someone else, calling out like that in the dark would be terrifying, almost like they wanted to scare him. But no matter what, Ethan quickly turns back to his campfire, his heart pounding, and doesn't hear that voice again for the rest of the night. What do you think was out there in those woods with Ethan? Have you ever felt watched when you were alone in the dark? Hey everyone! I put a lot of effort and heart into creating these videos just for you. If you're enjoying the content, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a quick comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps me motivated to bring more awesome videos your way. Sometimes camping means sleeping inside your car or truck instead of a tent. This is called car camping. It can feel safer in many ways, especially when you're alone. This story is about a young man named Ethan. He drove his pickup truck out to a quiet spot near Pine Lake, a small town in Oregon. Ethan found an empty, foggy road next to a thick forest. It seemed like the perfect place to park and sleep for the night, no one else around, peace and quiet. But Ethan was wrong. In the middle of the night, strange noises woke him up. There was tapping on the truck's window. He grabbed his GoPro and started recording, trying to catch whatever was outside. The glass fogged up. Then, the tapping came again, louder this time. Ethan's heart raced as he stayed inside, locked in. The video skips to the morning. Ethan looks at his truck's back window and sees handprints all over the glass. Someone had been there, wiping away dirt to peer inside. Finger scratches ran along the side of his truck, like something or someone had been trying to get in. Thankfully, the back canopy was locked tight. Ethan wasn't alone in those woods after all, but he was safe inside his truck. Have you ever felt watched when you thought you were alone? What do you think was outside Ethan's truck that night? Here's a story from a small town in northern Minnesota, shared on a YouTube channel called Quiet Nights. It's about a woman named Emily, who loves to go van camping alone in the quiet woods near her hometown. She calls her van the Dreamcatcher, a little home on wheels where she escapes from the busy world. One cold October night, Emily was sleeping deeply when around 4:30 a.m., she woke up to a sharp knocking right by her head on the side of the van. There were 3 sets of knocks, each with 3 taps, slow and deliberate. By the third set, Emily grabbed her phone and started recording quietly, heart pounding. A rough voice whispered through the small window, "I have a question for you." Emily whispered back, "It's 4:30 in the morning." "Who is this?" "I don't feel safe." The man's voice was calm but strange. "I just have a question." Emily, trembling, peeked out the front windshield. Far down the foggy road, she could see a car parked with its headlights on, almost like it was watching her. The car slowly backed away and disappeared into the misty trees. The next morning, Emily found deep boot prints pressed hard into the frozen dirt right outside her van. Someone had been there, close enough to try to open her door. Luckily, she'd locked everything tight. Stories like this make you wonder, was it just a strange stranger, or something darker lurking in the shadows? What do you think was really out there that night? If you've ever had a visit like this, or something even stranger, what did you do? On a chilly Halloween night, YouTuber Jake Carter takes his stealth camper van out to the edge of the Silver Springs woods. He drives as close as he can to the thick forest before parking and preparing to continue on foot. Unfortunately, the van can't go any further. This is as close as he'll get. Right next to the woods stands an old, weathered church and a small cemetery, silent under the flickering streetlights. Jake plans to make a latte and settle in for a quiet moment before venturing deeper into the trees. But as he prepares his drink, strange things begin to happen. "I don't think this is quite right. I should have grabbed a saucepan with a lid," Jake mutters to himself. Just then, a faint white shadow slips quietly past behind him, barely visible in the dim light. Moments later, soft noises echo nearby. When Jake looks out into the dark, small orb-like lights flicker in the distance, glowing faintly through the fog. "What's that?" he whispers. "I've just come up to that spot where the light was shining." Suddenly, something moves. "Wait, did that just move? I'm gonna have to check it out." Jake squints toward the shadowy shape briefly illuminated by a weak beam of light, an eerie silhouette that vanishes before he can get a clear look. But as he walks deeper into the woods, he freezes. "I swear, I keep seeing someone ahead in the dark," he says quietly. He pauses, heart pounding. "Hold on, there's nobody there." "I swear." A quiet voice in his mind warns, "Be honest with yourself." And then, unmistakably, a figure appears. "No way." "That's a person," Jake says, voice barely steady. He can't believe it himself. "I'm not joking, what the heck was that?" "I couldn't see their face, but I saw them turn around and look right at me." Some viewers in the comments say it must have been a mannequin someone left there as a Halloween prank. Others point to the cemetery nearby and the glowing orbs, suggesting something paranormal was happening. And of course, some think the whole thing might have been staged. What really happened that night in the woods? That's a question only the shadows can answer. I grew up in a small town in northern Michigan. Every deer season around November, my family and I would head up to our hunting cabin near Silver Lake. My great-grandfather built that cabin back in 1984. It was a cozy place for its time. A little old-fashioned now, but it worked just fine for me and my friends. About 2 years ago, my buddies Jake and Matt joined me for a late October trip to get ready for the muzzleloader season. We were scouting an area about a mile from the cabin, searching for signs of deer because we were thinking about putting up a stand there. After splitting up and wandering through the woods to find the best spot with clear views, I stumbled across a pile of rocks hidden under some brush. When I took a closer look, I realized it was a grave marker for a man named Ed Crane. We didn't feel scared, just curious. We took some pictures and, after picking a good spot for a stand, made our way back to the cabin. Jake tried to look up Ed Crane later but didn't find much about him. Fast forward 3 weeks, and we were back at the cabin for the official gun season. This time, it was just Jake and me. We were sitting inside, talking about where to hunt on opening day. I decided to try out the stand we had set up during muzzleloader season. Jake headed about 1.5 miles the other way toward a small lake on the property. I left the cabin around 4:45 a.m. since I had a long walk ahead and wanted to get to the stand well before daylight. This isn't a national forest, and no vehicles are allowed on the hunting trails. We split up at the end of the road, me going left toward the stand, Jake heading right toward the lake. It was a normal morning walk. I'd been hunting in those woods since I was 9, so 1.5 miles was nothing unusual. When I reached the stand, I moved quietly, careful not to spook any deer that might be resting nearby. As the sun slowly rose, I kept glancing to my right, toward that grave we'd found. It was about 30 yards away, barely visible through the thick brush. There was just enough light to make out the mound of rocks. Suddenly, something shifted in the corner of my eye on the left. It didn't scare me, I'm used to seeing movement early in the morning while hunting. If anything, it made my heart race with excitement. I turned my head fully to look but saw nothing. No movement at all. Then, from right behind me, I heard a whispery shout, "Hui!" It wasn't loud, but it was enough to make me jump so hard that the stand shook beneath me. I spun around quickly, but there was nothing there, no one. I turned on my headlamp and scanned the area for 5 or 6 minutes, but found nothing. Shaking, I grabbed my handheld radio and called out to Jake. No answer. I kept calling his name, eyes darting back and forth for 20 minutes. Dawn was breaking, and as I started to convince myself it was just my nerves, the fog began to lift. That's when I heard it again. "Hey, Caleb!" The same soft, eerie whisper. That was enough. I grabbed my pack and rifle faster than I thought possible. I left the radio on the seat by accident. I climbed down the ladder so quickly I almost slipped. Once on the ground, I walked fast, glancing over my shoulder every few steps. When I got back to the cabin, Jake wasn't there. He was still out hunting. Eventually, Jake returned, looking confused. He kept asking if I had been the one yelling into the radio. I told him what happened, how I never yelled at all. His radio was clipped to his belt as he stood in the cabin doorway, trying to make sense of it all. Suddenly, his radio began to emit a strange, screeching noise, not static, but something organic, like an animal. We listened closely and left the radio beside us for the rest of the day. Nothing else happened. Later that week, we brought Matt along and searched for my missing radio near the stand and on the ground. It was gone. Since then, we don't hunt in that part of the woods anymore. You don't even see hunters going past the old gate in that direction. It was the strangest, most unexplained experience of my life. It was a chilly December night in the small town of Pine Lake. I was hanging out with a couple of friends, Ethan and Marcus. We were bored, restless, and had nothing to do. One of us suggested we head to the old train station platform nearby to snap some pictures and just mess around. The platform was just a short walk from our homes. When we arrived, we started taking photos of the quiet, almost empty space around us, the kind of place that feels frozen in time. After a while, the cold really started to bite, and our stomachs growled. We decided it was time to head back. The route took us across a narrow footbridge over the canal that runs through town. We lingered on the bridge for a bit, joking and taking more pictures. The night felt peaceful, almost like a scene from an old movie. But the cold was creeping in, so we began walking back. The bridge was barely wide enough for the three of us to walk side by side. I led the way, with Ethan and Marcus following behind, chatting and laughing. Marcus cracked a joke, and I turned around, still smiling, when I suddenly noticed a man just a few feet behind Ethan. He looked to be in his late 30s, his face grimy. He wore a worn black and white flannel shirt and a faded baseball cap pulled low. His arms hung loosely at his sides. In one hand, he held a cigarette. In the other, a large kitchen knife. Clear as day. My heart froze. I quickly turned back forward, acting like I hadn't seen him. For some reason, that felt like the safest move. My fight or flight kicked in, and I started briskly walking toward the end of the bridge. I hoped my friends would catch on and pick up the pace. Glancing back, I saw they were right behind me. But the man was too. He was so close now that anyone watching might have thought he was part of our group. Suddenly, he stepped off the bridge, veering right onto a dark path. Ethan and Marcus still hadn't noticed him. Feeling like I might have to defend myself, I raised my tripod like a makeshift weapon. The man seemed to get the message and took the path to the left. We kept moving until I whispered the whole situation to Ethan. Walking backward, we watched as the man disappeared into the shadows. We didn't waste a second and hurried to my car. We drove straight to the nearest gas station, bought some food, and talked it over. The whole thing felt like just another strange story until a few days ago when I was scrolling through the pictures I took that night. There it was. A photo of Ethan standing under the station light, and just beyond the glow, behind a parked freight car, the shadowy figure of the man. That picture was taken at least 30 minutes before the encounter on the bridge. He had been watching us, waiting for us to lower our cameras, to turn our backs. You hear stories about moments like this, creepy shadows lurking, but you never think it'll happen to you. I still get chills thinking about how differently it could have ended. What do you think happened next? Have you ever felt like someone was watching you in the dark? I want to share a story from when my husband, Jake, was still in the army. After we got married, we settled into a small town called Pine Lake, somewhere in rural Georgia. Even though Pine Lake had a reputation as a quiet military town, it wasn't the safest place to live. I remember one night hearing gunshots echoing down our street. It was unsettling. Jake's job meant he was often away for training or on night shifts when he wasn't traveling. That left me alone in the house most of the time. Back then, I was a full-time college student, so I filled my days with classes and homework to keep my mind busy while he was gone. One night, I was writing an essay in bed with our dog, Max. Max is a big, goofy lab mix, usually calm and friendly. But suddenly, we both heard a strange rustling coming from the ceiling above us. Max started barking and growling, which was odd for him. He's never acted like that before. At first, I figured it was just mice. I messaged Jake about the noise, and he agreed, telling me he'd call pest control to handle it so I wouldn't have to deal with traps or bait. A couple of days later, pest control came by. The guy found some signs of mice and roaches in the attic and set out some bait. He also sealed a few holes where critters could get in. But over the next week, the noises got louder, always at night. Max was clearly stressed, and one night, his fur even stood up along his back. That freaked me out. I called Jake, hoping for reassurance. He told me it was just the mice scaring Max and that I shouldn't worry. Later that same night, just as I was drifting off to sleep, I thought I heard footsteps coming from above. Max stayed silent, so I told myself I was just imagining things. Being alone so much, I did feel anxious at night, especially without Jake around. The next day, I slept late and woke up feeling feverish. When I got up to let Max outside, I walked through the garage to the backyard door. Our house was laid out strangely like that. Right above the garage door was the entrance to the attic. As I reached for the door, I stopped cold. There was a huge dirty handprint smudged across the door, along with other marks from inside. Someone had been there. My heart raced. I snapped a quick picture and called the police. I texted Jake what was happening, but he couldn't respond because of work. The police arrived fast since their station was just down the road. I showed them the handprints and told them I didn't understand how someone had gotten inside without me hearing the garage door open. Suddenly, it hit me, maybe the noises weren't just mice, and the footsteps I heard really were a person. The officers checked the attic and found a man hiding behind some boxes. He was a meth addict who lived with his family nearby but had been avoiding staying there. Somehow, he had broken into our garage one day when I was out and had been living in our attic for over a week. Pest control must have missed him during their inspection. Our security cameras never caught him either, so he must have sneaked in another way. We moved out of that house soon after, and even years later, I still get uneasy being alone at night. I'm just grateful nobody got hurt. Have you ever felt that creeping fear when you're home alone? What would you have done if you were me? It was the year 2006. I had just moved into a small house in the quiet town of Pine Lake with my college buddy Ethan and his friend, Rachel. I worked overnight shifts at a local radio station a few times a week. To keep my body on track, I stuck to the same late-night schedule even on my nights off, which meant I was up well past midnight with a lot of time to kill. One thing I liked to do in those quiet hours was to walk through the old cemetery just down the road from our place. I usually took my camera and a tape recorder, hoping to catch something out of the ordinary. I did this a few times and even got some photos that showed strange activity, a weird swirl of colors near a bench, something I couldn't explain. One night, driving back home, I played the tape I just recorded in my car. I had asked if anyone else was there, even though I was alone. To my shock, a tired, barely audible voice answered with a simple, "No," like it was saying we were the only ones present. That moment nearly made me swerve off the road. I felt chills creep down my spine and a sudden wave of fear. I guess I was trying to find something, but I didn't really know what I'd do if I actually caught it. When I got home, I woke Ethan up, needing some comfort. He wasn't exactly sympathetic. He told me to leave that ghost stuff out of the house. Right after that night, things started getting strange. One evening, I was in my room watching videos when the fake leaves I had hanging on the wall suddenly started swinging back and forth like something had hit them. Another night, after coming back from the store, I left a plastic shopping bag on the floor of my room. While lying in bed, I heard the bag crackling like someone was squeezing it with their hands. I looked over, but the bag was just sitting there. The crackling kept going, and then the bag started hopping and moving across the floor by itself. I jumped up, climbed onto my bed, and called Ethan, who was upstairs. I told him to come down fast. The moment I hung up, the bag stopped moving and went silent. Ethan thought I was losing it. He took the bag outside to check if maybe a mouse or something was inside, but there was nothing. That room also gave me some of the worst nightmares I've ever had. Since I was a kid, I've had this recurring nightmare where it feels like my eyes are being forced shut, either just before I fall asleep or right after waking up. My teeth chatter uncontrollably, and I can barely whisper to tell it to go away. I never understood what it was. Sometimes, during these episodes, bad things happen. One time, I felt invisible hands grabbing at me. Another time, I saw a terrifying face staring from my closet. One night, while drifting off early, that feeling came back weak at first. I even taunted it, saying, "Is that all you've got?" But it grew stronger and harder to fight. For what felt like 30 seconds, I was paralyzed, unable to move. My body felt like it was spinning, even though I was lying still. Finally, it stopped. I still don't know if it was sleep paralysis or if something else in the room was causing it. Then, early one morning around 5 a.m., the whole house shook with the sound of heavy footsteps thudding through somewhere inside. Everyone else was asleep except me. It couldn't have been Ethan upstairs, he's never that loud. We lived near a military base, so maybe it was an explosion or something, but the footsteps sounded too deliberate, like a giant walking through the house. All of this was confusing, but the moment my roommate and I realized we weren't alone was when I snapped a photo of the three of us in the living room during a small party. I was holding my camera as steady as I could, but the picture showed strange activity all around us. To the right of the lamp, there were odd strands of light that didn't match any source in the house. Next to that was a strange glowing figure made of light. But the strangest thing was a rising mass of yellow light between Ethan and me. It looked like it had eyes, a face, and a sinister smile sitting above a body. Maybe it was a reflection from the kitchen light, but it was way too big and bright. I tried taking the same picture again later, but those yellow lights never appeared. I don't know if something from the cemetery followed me home or if the house had a presence before we moved in. That was the worst of it, and about 10 months later, we moved out without telling anyone who came after us. What do you think was really there? Have you ever felt like you weren't alone in your own home? Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. A friend of mine, let's call him Ethan, was 27 back then, and his old buddy, Michael, was about the same age. Michael was the kind of guy who loved taking risks. Ethan was going through a rough patch in life, feeling lost and pretty isolated. They both shared a strange hobby, collecting old fire alarms, exit signs, and other safety gear. It's unusual, sure, but there's a community for just about everything. Michael had this habit of sneaking into abandoned buildings to take these devices. Sometimes he'd add them to his collection, other times he'd sell them online. Ethan wasn't okay with stealing, but he was desperate for a friend, so he tagged along on one of Michael's adventures. That trip would turn into a nightmare Ethan could never forget. On November 18, 2019, they drove out to Gary, Indiana. If you've heard of Gary, you know it's not exactly the safest place to roam around. They planned to stay at a hotel in nearby Hammond and check out a few abandoned schools where Michael hoped to find some rare safety equipment to grab. Things went smoothly until the evening of November 20th. Around 7 p.m., Ethan and Michael arrived at the old Horace S. Norton Elementary School, located at 1356 Harrison Boulevard. The front doors were wide open, really inviting, but in a creepy way. The air inside reeked of sewage and something foul like skunks had taken up residence. They headed to the north wing on the first floor. Ethan watched as Michael tore down old exit signs. Ethan felt uneasy about it but stayed quiet, hoping the thrill would distract him from his loneliness. As they moved to the south side of the building, they entered the cafeteria. Darkness swallowed the room except for their flashlights cutting through the black. Graffiti covered the walls, and desks and books were scattered everywhere. It was exactly like you'd picture an abandoned school. Ethan snapped pictures along the way, trying to keep his nerves in check. After the cafeteria, they made their way to the gym, and that's when Ethan's life changed forever. With his flashlight, Ethan noticed a dark trail on the dusty floor. It was blood. Curiosity pulled him closer, following the trail, until he found something horrifying. A young woman, around 27, lay lifeless in a pool of blood. Her arms were raised, her hands twisted into a shape Ethan later described as like a dinosaur. The scene was so chilling that just hearing Ethan describe it kept me awake for nights. He screamed, stumbling back to Michael, who whispered urgently, "They might hear us." Ethan was shaken. Showing Michael the body, Michael just said, "Don't tell anyone. We act like we never saw this." They left as fast as they could, their hands trembling. Once back at the hotel, Ethan called the police. The woman, later identified as Adriana Saunders, had been missing for 2 days. Police quickly uncovered messages on her phone. She was planning to buy some weed and an iPhone. The suspects intended to rob her. But the robbery went horribly wrong. They killed her, then dragged her body into the elementary school gym and dumped it there just a day before Ethan and Michael arrived. The police arrested a teenage boy responsible and, thanks to his cooperation, 2 others were charged as well, all tried as adults. The story even made the local news. Ethan cut ties with Michael for good reasons. And honestly, that night still haunts both Ethan and me to this day. Hey everyone! I put a lot of effort and heart into creating these videos just for you. If you're enjoying the content, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a quick comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps me motivated to bring more awesome videos your way. I used to be a sheriff's deputy in a small town called Willow Creek. We had more barns than businesses, and the kind of cold that cut through your coat in winter. Folks knew each other's dogs by name, but they didn't talk much about room 103 at the old roadside inn. The Whispering Pines Inn sat right off Route 12. Paint peeling off the wood. An old neon sign that flickered like a dying firefly. Nobody stayed there unless they were desperate or just passing through. I never thought much of the place. That was until I got called out one snowy night, just after Thanksgiving. The innkeeper, a nervous guy named Bill, said he heard a radio playing loud in room 103. Said the room was empty. Hadn't been rented in weeks. He told me over the phone, it started playing by itself again. I figured maybe a squatter had slipped in. I put on my jacket, grabbed my flashlight, and drove out there. The wind howled through the pine trees as I pulled into the lot. The place looked even sadder than I remembered. One porch light buzzed weakly. The rest were dark. Bill met me outside. His hands were shaking. "I didn't go in," he whispered. "You know what happened last time." I didn't answer him. Just nodded and walked in. The hallway smelled like mildew and old carpet. I passed room 101. Then 102. When I got to 103, I heard it. A soft crackle, then an old country song playing. Real faint, like it was coming from an antique radio. I knocked once. No answer. I opened the door slowly. The room was empty. Dust floated in the air. The bed was still made, and the windows were shut tight. But on the desk sat a small, rusted radio. One of those 1960s kinds with big knobs and a fabric front. The music stopped. Then I heard static. And a voice. It wasn't singing. It wasn't talking like a normal broadcast. It whispered, slow and broken. "Why did you leave me?" I stared at the radio. My breath caught in my throat. Then the voice said again, louder this time. "You said you'd come back." I turned the radio off. Pulled the plug. But the static didn't stop. I stepped back, hand on my belt. Then the air changed. It got heavy. Real heavy. Like the room itself was leaning on my chest. And I saw her. In the corner near the window. A woman. Pale as snow. Wearing a faded blue dress. Her hair was long, wet-looking. Like she'd come in from the rain. Her eyes were open, wide and hollow. She stared right through me. Then she stepped forward. I don't remember drawing my weapon. But I know I backed out fast. I nearly tripped over the rug. When I blinked, she was gone. Just the quiet hum of nothing. I slammed the door shut. My hands were ice. Bill was still waiting outside. When he saw me, he didn't ask. Just handed me a paper cup of coffee from the lobby and said, "She's been in there since 1964. I asked what he meant. He looked down and said, "A woman checked in that year." said her husband was coming back from the war. She waited. Days turned into weeks. No one ever came. Housekeeping found her dead by the window. She'd starved herself. He paused. Then added, "They say she still waits." The radio was theirs. She used to play it every day. Same song. I didn't say much. Just told him to keep the room locked up and call me if anything happened again. That night, back at home, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the way she looked at me. Not angry. Not sad. Just empty. And the words from the radio kept playing in my head. "You said you'd come back." I retired from the force 2 years after that. Moved to a quieter place near the mountains. But sometimes, especially on cold nights when the wind is high and the trees sway outside my cabin, I swear I hear that radio playing. That same crackle. That same voice. "Why did you leave me?" I don't know what she saw in me. Maybe just another uniform. Another man who promised something he couldn't keep. I haven't been back to Willow Creek since. But I still wonder if she's there. Waiting. Listening. I moved to Pine Hollow after my divorce. A small town, quiet streets, cold winters. I needed peace. Just somewhere to think. My new house sat at the end of a gravel road. It was old but had charm. White paint peeling off the porch rails. Wooden floors that creaked no matter how softly you walked. The kind of house you'd see in an old movie. It was early November. The air smelled like leaves and wood smoke. Every night, I'd sit on the front steps with a blanket and a cup of tea. I liked watching the streetlight flicker across the road. It had this soft hum, like a tired old engine. Kind of comforting. That's when I started noticing the porch light. Not mine. The one on the abandoned house across the street. That place had been empty for years. Everyone in town said it used to belong to a teacher who vanished. No family. No visitors. Just gone. The house sat there like a forgotten ghost, windows dark, lawn overgrown. But one night, the porch light turned on. I remember it clearly. I had just stepped outside with my tea. The streetlight buzzed like always. Then, click, the porch light on the old house lit up. Yellow. Soft. Like someone had just gotten home. I stared at it for a while. No movement. No cars. No shadows. Just the light. The next morning, I checked again. Off. As if nothing happened. I told myself maybe the wiring was old. Power surge or something. I didn't think much of it. Until it happened again. And again. Always around 9 p.m., always just as I stepped outside. It became a pattern. I'd sit. I'd sip my tea. The light would come on. After a week, it started to feel intentional. I mentioned it to the local hardware guy, Tom. He raised an eyebrow. "That house doesn't have power," he said. I blinked. "What do you mean?" "The lines were cut off years ago. No one's paid a bill since 2009. I tried to laugh it off. Told myself maybe he was mistaken. But that night, I didn't sit on my porch. I stayed inside, lights off. Watching. 9 p.m. came. The porch light across the street turned on. But this time, it stayed on longer. At 9:03, I saw movement behind the window. A shape. Tall. Thin. My breath caught. I leaned closer to the glass, squinting into the dark. It didn't move again. No footsteps. No flicker of light inside. Just that single shape. Watching. I barely slept that night. The next day, I asked the sheriff about it. Officer Claire Jennings. A calm, older woman who had been on the force for 20 years. She said she'd check it out. Later that afternoon, she knocked on my door. I went over, she said, frowning. No sign of a break-in. Place was locked up. Power box is still shut off. I asked if she saw the porch light. She nodded slowly. Yeah. But when I got closer, it was already off. We didn't speak for a moment. Then she said, "You ever heard of a death echo?" I shook my head. Old ghost story, she said. Some believe tragic moments leave behind energy. Like a tape stuck on replay. I didn't believe in ghosts. At least, not then. That night, I sat on the porch again. Just to see. 9 p.m. The porch light turned on. But this time, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Do you see me now?" I dropped my tea. The porch light flickered. Once. Twice. Then it went out. I stood there, heart pounding. My phone buzzed again. "You left the porch light on for me." I ran inside and locked the door. The next morning, Officer Jennings came back. I showed her the messages, but they were gone. No unknown numbers in my log. No screenshots. Just empty silence. She didn't think I was lying. She offered to install a camera across the street on the utility pole. I said yes. For a week, nothing happened. No porch light. No texts. Nothing on the camera. I started thinking maybe it was stress. Maybe I was just lonely. Tired. Then came the last night. 9 p.m. The porch light turned on. But this time, my own porch light turned on too. I hadn't touched the switch. And there, on my porch, stood the figure. Not across the street. Here. It was tall. Thin. Pale. Eyes too dark. Like two empty holes. I couldn't move. It raised its hand slowly and pointed across the street. Then it vanished. I don't know how long I sat there, frozen. When I finally stood, my hands were ice cold. I never saw the light again after that night. The camera footage? It glitched right at 9 o'clock. Static. I moved out 2 weeks later. Couldn't handle it. But sometimes, late at night, when I drive past that street, I glance at the house. And I swear, the porch light is still on. Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. I moved to Willow Creek last winter. A quiet little town in Ohio. One of those places where people wave when they drive by and the diner knows your name by the second visit. After my divorce, I needed a new start. Somewhere calm. I found this old 2-bedroom home on the edge of town. It had a wraparound porch, wood siding that creaked in the wind, and a big yard with an old oak tree that scratched against the upstairs window on stormy nights. The neighbors were friendly. Quiet. Just like I wanted. The house had character, but it also felt tired. Like it held on to things. Memories. Maybe even secrets. But I told myself I was just overthinking things. I had been through a lot. I spent my night sitting on the porch with a mug of tea, bundled in a blanket, watching the streetlight flicker on the corner. It flickered every night at the same time, 8:36. Like clockwork. A small detail, but one I noticed. A few weeks after moving in, something strange started happening. It began with the porch light. Every night around 2 a.m., it would turn on. The first few times, I thought maybe it was motion activated. Maybe a raccoon or a passing cat. But then one night, I looked through the peephole. There was no one there. No animals. No wind. Just the porch light, glowing like someone was waiting outside. I shrugged it off. Told myself the wiring was old. The house had been built in the 40s. Things like that happen. But it kept happening. Every night, 2 a.m., the light would click on. Always at the same time. No footsteps. No knock. Just light. Then, one night, it changed. That night, I had trouble sleeping. A storm was coming in. The wind had that sharp, metallic smell. I could hear the tree branches scratching against the siding. I curled up in bed, pulled the blankets close. At 2 a.m. sharp, the porch light came on. But this time, I heard footsteps. Soft. Slow. One step at a time, like someone was pacing. I held my breath. Got out of bed as quietly as I could. Walked to the front door and looked through the peephole. Nothing. The porch was empty. But the light was on. And the air looked wrong. Like it shimmered slightly. I thought maybe I was just tired. Sleep deprived. I went back to bed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there. The next night, I stayed up, sitting in the living room with the lights off. I wanted to see it happen. At 2 a.m., like always, the porch light flicked on. And standing just outside the range of the light, at the edge of the porch, was a man. Tall. Still. Wearing what looked like an old uniform. Like something a train conductor or security guard might wear in the 1950s. His head was tilted slightly. As if he was listening. But he didn't move. I stood up, heart pounding. The moment I did, the porch light turned off. And the figure was gone. I rushed outside, flashlight in hand. The yard was empty. No footprints. No sound. Just wind and the creaking of the porch floorboards beneath my feet. I called the sheriff's office the next morning. Deputy Carter came by. Middle-aged guy. Kind, with tired eyes. I explained what happened. He didn't laugh. Didn't brush it off. He just nodded and said, "You're not the first." I asked what he meant. He told me about the previous owner, an older woman named Helen. Lived alone. Sweet lady. Passed away in the house 2 years ago. She used to call the station at night, always around 2 a.m., saying someone was at her door. A man in an old uniform. Said he never knocked. Just stood there under the porch light. They checked every time. Never found anyone. Eventually, they stopped going out. Thought she was just confused. Old age, maybe. But she always said the same thing. He doesn't want in. He just waits. And one night, he'll stop waiting. That line stuck with me. Deputy Carter told me if it made me feel better, I could replace the light. Install cameras. Do whatever helped. I did. I changed the bulb. I installed a camera facing the porch. That night, I stayed up again. At 2 a.m., the porch light turned on. The camera showed nothing. But I saw him. Same man. Same tilt of the head. Same silent stare. And this time, he stepped forward. Not much. Just one step. But it was enough. I backed away from the window. turned off all the lights in the house, curled up in bed and waited for morning. The next day, I watched the camera footage again. At 2 a.m., the porch light came on. No person. No motion. Nothing at all. But my tea mug, which I'd left out on the porch table, slid an inch across the wood. I haven't sat on the porch since. Now, I keep the porch light unscrewed, the switch taped over. But even with it disconnected, I still wake up some nights to a soft glow outside the window. I never open the door. Some nights, I still hear the footsteps. Closer now. One day, he'll stop waiting. And when he does, I don't think I'll be the one answering. I moved to Willow Lane right after my wife, Sarah, passed away. It's a quiet street in the town of Pine Hollow, the kind of place where neighbors wave from their porches and leave out bowls of candy on Halloween. I was looking for silence. A place to grieve. To breathe. The house was old, built in the 50s. It had creaky floors, drafty windows, and a weird smell that reminded me of wet leaves and dust. But it was cheap. And more importantly, it was far from anyone who knew me. I spent most of my nights sitting on the porch with a beer, watching the streetlights flicker through the fog. The nights were cold, even in early fall. The wind would rattle the shutters, and sometimes, I'd hear leaves scraping across the pavement like dry whispers. 2 weeks after I moved in, I started noticing the TV in the living room turning on by itself. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Old house, bad wiring, nothing strange. But it always happened at the same time. 2:37 a.m. static. Just loud, bright static. It wouldn't shut off with the remote. I had to walk up to it and unplug it. And even then, I felt weird. Like someone was watching me from the hallway. One night, I unplugged the TV and left the cord out. Just to be sure. I went to bed early, curled under the covers, and tried to ignore the sounds of the wind brushing against the siding. I woke up again at 2:37 a.m. The TV was on. Static. Loud and sharp, like it was screaming through the house. I jumped out of bed, heart pounding, and ran to the living room. The screen flickered with white and gray snow, and the cord was still lying beside the outlet. The TV wasn't even plugged in. I stood frozen in the middle of the room. I felt cold, colder than the wind outside. The kind of cold that sinks into your bones and makes your teeth hurt. Then the static changed. It stopped flickering and turned dark, but not off. Just dark. Like something was behind the glass. Watching. Moving. A voice came through the speakers, low and crackling. I couldn't understand the words, but it felt angry. Sad. Broken. I yanked the cord from the wall again. Even though it wasn't connected. The screen went black. That night, I slept in the car. The next morning, I asked around the neighborhood about the house. Most people didn't know much. One old woman, Mrs. Langford, who'd lived on the street her whole life, finally gave me something. That place has always had a sadness, she said. Years back, a young girl lived there. She was into strange things. Paranormal shows, ghost hunting, that sort of thing. What happened to her? I asked. She disappeared one night. They never found her. But neighbors swore they kept hearing her TV on at night, even long after the house was empty. I didn't say anything. Just nodded and thanked her. That night, I sat in the living room with the lights off, just listening. At 2:37 a.m., the air in the house changed. The kind of change you feel in your ears, like pressure before a storm. The TV turned on again, this time without any sound. Just a black screen. Then, a message flashed in white letters. I see you. I turned around, slow and shaking. The hallway behind me was dark, but I swear I saw someone standing there. Just for a second. A small figure. Maybe 5 feet tall. Long hair. Bare feet. She vanished when I blinked. I ran out of the house and didn't come back until sunrise. The next day, I tried throwing out the TV. Carried it to the curb, set it by the trash bin. Thought I was done. That night, I came home late. I didn't hear anything strange. No static. No flickers. Until I walked into the living room. The TV was back. Same place. Same hum. And taped to the screen was a photo of me sleeping in my bed. I burned the TV in the backyard that night. Watched it melt into black smoke and plastic. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. But even now, a year later, I still wake up at 2:37 a.m. No TV. No screen. Just a whisper in the hallway. Sometimes it sounds like her. Or like my wife. Or like something else entirely. I don't know what she wants. But I don't think she's gone. I moved to Pine Hollow after my wife passed away. It was a quiet town in the Midwest, full of foggy mornings and lonely streets. I needed space to grieve. To breathe. To be left alone. I rented a small blue house on Willow Street. It had white shutters and a wraparound porch. The place had been empty for years, the realtor said. People claimed it was too close to the woods. Too dark. Too far from town. That was exactly what I wanted. The first few weeks were peaceful. I'd sit on the porch with coffee, watching the fog roll in. The trees swayed gently in the breeze. The air always smelled like wet leaves. Cold wind crept through the boards at night. The house creaked a lot, but it felt quiet. Still. Until it didn't. It started with the lights. I'd be sitting in the living room, reading on my phone, when one of the hallway bulbs would flicker. Sometimes the kitchen light would turn off by itself, even though I just changed the bulb. I blamed the wiring. Old house, old problems. Then came the scratching. At first, I thought it was raccoons in the attic. But the sound came from inside the walls. Scratching and tapping, like tiny fingers running across the wood. Always at night. Always when I was alone in the dark. One night, I called out. "Hello?" And the scratching stopped. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in bed with my phone flashlight on, staring at the doorway. Waiting for something I couldn't name. A week later, I found the mirror. It was in the attic. I don't even know why I went up there. Maybe I was tired of feeling scared. Or maybe I just wanted to prove nothing was wrong. The mirror was covered with a gray cloth, leaned against the far wall. Dust floated in the air like snow. I pulled the cloth off. It was old, heavy, with a thick, cracked frame. But the surface was too clean. No dust. No fog. Just a perfect reflection of the attic. Except, something was wrong. I looked into it. My reflection stood still. But I blinked, and it didn't. I stepped back. The image stayed still for one more second, then moved. It smiled. I dropped the cloth and ran downstairs. From then on, things got worse. Every night, I'd hear footsteps on the porch, even when no one was there. My phone would freeze when I tried to call anyone. I stopped sleeping. I started talking to myself. Just to hear a voice that wasn't the house. And the mirror? It moved again. This time, it showed the kitchen. In the reflection, someone was standing behind me, near the fridge. But when I turned around, no one was there. I stopped using the attic. I locked the door and put a chair under the knob. But that night, I woke up to a loud bang. The attic door was open. I grabbed the flashlight and climbed the stairs. The mirror was gone. Gone. Only the gray cloth remained, flat on the floor. I searched the whole house. Nothing. Until I found it, in the hallway. Standing up on its own. Facing my bedroom. That's when I realized it was following me. I started sleeping with the lights on. I spoke out loud every time I walked through the house. I didn't even know who I was talking to. I just knew I wasn't alone. I finally called the town sheriff. His name was Rick. Kind man, older, someone who believed in keeping secrets quiet. I've heard things about that house, he told me. My uncle used to live there. He went missing back in '96. Never found. Folks say the mirror was his. I told him I wanted out. That I couldn't stay another night. He looked at me, tired and pale, and said, "Then don't." That night, I packed everything. I left the mirror in the hallway. I didn't even look at it. I drove off before the sun came up. But something followed me. Now, wherever I go, the mirror shows up. In hotel rooms. Empty cabins. Even in the back seat of my car. Last week, I moved in with my sister. I felt safe there. Until this morning. I woke up to a strange sound. Soft tapping against the closet door. I opened it. The mirror was inside. And this time, my reflection wasn't alone. There was a figure standing behind me. No face. Just long hair and a wide, slow smile. I turned around. Nothing. But when I looked back into the glass, it was waving. Just like always. They say nothing much happens in Maple Hollow, a small town tucked between pine-covered hills and foggy backroads. But something did happen here, something people don't talk about anymore. Chris was a local sheriff. Mid-40s. Quiet man. Widowed 3 years ago after a car crash took his wife, Denise. He hadn't been the same since. He mostly kept to himself, except for coffee runs to the diner and evening drives through the quiet streets. Maple Hollow didn't have much crime, but Chris still liked to check the edges of town. Just in case. One chilly October night, with the wind whistling through the trees and leaves scraping the pavement like dry fingers, Chris got a call from Linda, the manager at the Willow Inn, a small, aging motel at the edge of town. "Room 12, she whispered over the phone. "It's making noise again." Chris sighed. Room 12 was supposed to be empty. It hadn't been rented out in years. After the man who stayed there went missing. No signs of forced entry. Just his stuff, and the old radio on the nightstand. That radio never worked right after that. Chris grabbed his flashlight and drove through the quiet, foggy streets. The motel stood alone, with one flickering porch light and the smell of cold rain in the air. Linda stood by the office door, arms folded. I locked room 12 myself. No one's gone in. But the radio, she looked up at him. "It's playing again." Chris nodded and headed down the walkway. The door to room 12 was shut, but the faint sound of static echoed from inside. He reached for the handle. Locked. He used his spare key. Click. The door creaked open. The room was dark except for a soft red glow coming from the old radio on the table. It was on. Playing soft music, something from the 50s, but warped and slow, like a record melting. The air smelled like dust and cold metal. The window was shut tight. The bed was untouched. Everything was just still. Chris stepped in. The door closed gently behind him. He walked over to the radio. As soon as he touched the knob, the music stopped. Dead silence. Then, a voice crackled through. "Chris." His blood ran cold. "Why didn't you come sooner?" It was a woman's voice. Soft. Sad. Familiar. "Denise?" He whispered her name without meaning to. The room felt colder. The mirror above the dresser fogged, as if someone had breathed on it. And then, words appeared on the glass. "You left me." Chris backed away. The radio buzzed louder. It wasn't his wife's voice anymore. It was deeper. Wrong. Like two people speaking at once. "She's not here anymore, Chris." He turned toward the door, but it wouldn't open. He jiggled the handle. Pulled harder. "Where were you when she needed you?" The voice was inside his head now. It knew. He stumbled back, falling into the chair by the table. The lights flickered. Shadows stretched across the walls, but nothing was moving. Nothing he could see. Then the bathroom door slowly creaked open. Drip. 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 Chris grabbed his flashlight and aimed it into the bathroom. The tub was full. Water up to the edge. But the faucet was dry. The water was pitch black. Floating in the center was her necklace. Denise's. He hadn't seen it since the accident. He'd searched everywhere for it. The room hummed. The radio began whispering something he couldn't make out, chanting, like voices in reverse. Chris reached into the tub. The water burned like ice, but he grabbed the necklace. And the moment he touched it, everything stopped. Silence. The radio clicked off. The lights steadied. The mirror went clear. The door unlocked. Chris stood there, shaking. Wet. Cold. Clutching the necklace like it was the last real thing in the world. He didn't say anything to Linda. Just nodded and walked out. Drove home in silence. The next morning, room 12 was empty. The radio gone. Tub dry. No necklace. No proof. But Chris kept hearing her voice in his dreams. He took a leave of absence after that. Moved out of Maple Hollow 2 months later. People still say room 12 gets warm in winter and cold in summer. That the radio sometimes plays by itself when the wind picks up. Linda no longer rents it. No one really asks why. But if you drive by the Willow Inn on a foggy night, and you hear an old song playing from the inn room, keep driving. Some things aren't meant to be reopened. What do you think that voice really was? Have you ever heard your name called when no one was there? Hey everyone! I put a lot of effort and heart into creating these videos just for you. If you're enjoying the content, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a quick comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps me motivated to bring more awesome videos your way. My name's Chris. I've been a patrol officer in Pine Ridge, a small town tucked between dense forests and quiet hills. Most people here know each other by name. It's the kind of place where the gas station clerk waves at you and the church bells still ring every Sunday. But there's a road here most folks avoid after dark. Hollow Pine Road. It's narrow, full of potholes, and lined with tall pine trees that block out the moonlight. Locals say it feels colder there. Quieter. Like the air presses down on you. I always thought that was just small-town superstition, until last November. It started after the autumn fair. Leaves had fallen and frost clung to windows. I was on the late shift, driving around town. It was close to midnight. My radio crackled, but there was no voice. Just static. Then silence. As I turned on the hollow pine, I noticed a soft white glow in the distance. Like someone had left a porch light on. But no one lives out there anymore. The last house on that road burned down years ago. Still, I slowed down and kept driving. The trees swayed. The wind felt sharp, like it was slicing through my uniform. I rolled down my window just a crack. The smell of smoke hit me. Not cigarette smoke, wood smoke, old and bitter. The kind you smell after something's burned for hours. I parked by the old mailbox. The house that once stood there had collapsed long ago. Only the stone steps remained. But that light, it was coming from somewhere behind the ruins. I grabbed my flashlight and got out. The forest was silent. No crickets. No owls. Just the sound of my boots crunching dead leaves. My flashlight flickered. I smacked it gently. It steadied. Then I heard it. A soft creaking noise. Like a rocking chair. Back and forth. Back and forth. I aimed the light toward the sound. Nothing. Just trees. Empty air. But the noise didn't stop. It grew louder. I felt my chest tighten. My breath turned white. It was freezing. Then I saw her. A woman in a long gray dress, sitting on a broken wooden chair near where the porch used to be. She wasn't moving. Just staring into the trees. Her hands rested in her lap, still as stone. "Ma'am?" I called out. "Are you okay?" No answer. I stepped closer. Her face was pale, and her hair hung wet and limp over her shoulders. Her eyes didn't blink. "Do you need help?" I tried again. She slowly turned her head. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Only the chair creaked. Then the light behind her, the one I'd seen from the road, shut off. Everything went dark. I turned to run back to my car. But it wasn't there. I spun in place, shining the flashlight in every direction. The road was gone. The forest looked different. Thicker. The trees seemed to lean toward me. I heard whispers. Low and sharp, like someone speaking just under their breath. My name was among them. Chris. I ran. Branches scraped my arms. My breath came out in gasps. After what felt like hours, I stumbled out onto the main road. My cruiser was right there, engine idling, lights on. It was like I'd never left. But I was covered in dirt and pine needles. My hands were shaking. I drove straight back to the station and didn't speak a word. The next morning, I checked the cruiser cam. Nothing. No light. No woman. No missing time. Just 30 minutes of me sitting in the car, staring forward. Like I'd never gotten out. But I remember the cold. The smoke. The rocking chair. I remember her eyes. I went back to Hollow Pine Road once more in daylight. The stone steps were still there. So was the charred ground. And something else. A single wooden chair, barely holding together. Sitting exactly where she was. It creaked gently in the wind. I haven't gone back since. Sometimes, I still smell smoke when I'm alone. Or hear that creaking sound in the distance, even when I'm miles away from that road. Was she real? Was I dreaming? I don't know. But that road hasn't been the same since. What do you think happened that night? Would you ever walk down Hollow Pine Road? Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. I used to be a night shift patrol officer in a quiet little town called Silver Pines, up in Oregon. Nothing ever really happened here. A few speeding tickets, noise complaints, maybe a lost dog every now and then. That was until last October. It started with a call from dispatch around 2:20 a.m. A woman named Joyce said she kept seeing someone standing outside her house. Just standing. Not moving. Under the flickering streetlight across the road. She lived on a quiet stretch at the edge of town, where the houses thinned out and the forest began. When I got there, I found her pacing on the front porch, wrapped in a blanket. "He's just watching," she whispered, pointing across the road. I turned. The streetlight flickered, then steadied. But there was no one there. Joyce wasn't the kind of person who made things up. I'd responded to her house once before. Her husband passed the year before, and she'd been dealing with some grief. But she never sounded panicked like this. "I saw him last night too," she said. "Same place. Didn't move. Just stared." I told her I'd do a drive around the block and come back to check in. She nodded but didn't go back inside. As I drove slowly down the street, I glanced at the sidewalk where she said he stood. The hairs on my arms stood up. There were footprints. In the dew-covered grass. Bare feet. That was strange. It was freezing outside. Too cold for someone to be walking around like that. I circled the area. Nothing. The woods at the end of the street were dark and thick. No sign of anyone. When I got back, Joyce was inside. Lights on in every room. She didn't come out again. I filed a routine report and moved on. I figured maybe it was just someone passing through. Maybe a teen pulling a prank. But that same week, 2 more calls came in. One from a man on Cedar Lane, and another from a young couple near the edge of the lake. Same story. A man, standing under a streetlight. Not walking. Not talking. Just staring. Each time, the streetlight nearby would flicker. Then stop when he disappeared. No one could describe his face. Just that he was tall, thin, and still. By the 4th report, I started getting uneasy. It was too specific. Too weird to just be a coincidence. One night, on my usual route, I parked at the far end of Joyce's street. Turned off my lights. Waited. Fog started rolling in from the woods. The air felt heavier than usual. Damp and cold. Then, the streetlight across from her house started flickering. There he was. Standing exactly where Joyce had said. He looked wrong. Like his limbs were just a little too long. His posture too stiff. And his head, it was tilted slightly, like he was listening to something. I stepped out of my car. "Hey!" I called. No response. I took a step closer. My boots crunched the gravel. He didn't move. But I did hear something. A faint crackling sound. Like a broken radio signal. Then the streetlight above him buzzed loudly and went out. When it came back on, he was gone. I rushed to the spot. No footprints. No trace. Just that buzzing in my ears that slowly faded away. I didn't tell anyone at the station. I didn't want to sound crazy. I just logged it as an unidentified loiterer and moved on. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. A week later, Joyce was found dead in her bed. Heart attack. Peaceful, they said. But what made my stomach turn was the message scratched onto her bedroom window on the inside. He watches through the light. No fingerprints. No forced entry. And no family to ask questions. I asked for security footage from the power station nearby. Just a shot in the dark. One of the techs handed me a USB drive. "There's something weird on the night she died," he said. I watched the footage back at the station. At exactly 2:18 a.m., every streetlight on Joyce's block blinked off. For exactly 8 seconds. When they turned back on, a tall shadow moved across her lawn. It didn't walk. It glided. No legs moving. No arms swinging. Just moved. I couldn't explain it. Still can't. I don't work night patrol anymore. Took a desk job. Thought it would help me sleep better. But every now and then, I drive through Silver Pines at night. Just to see. And sometimes, just sometimes, I see a light flicker at the edge of town. And I drive faster. Because I know someone's standing there. Not moving. Not speaking. Just waiting. I used to work as a part-time deputy in a small town called Cedar Grove. It's the kind of place where everyone knows each other, and not much ever happens. We had one grocery store, a diner that closed at 6 p.m., and a single stoplight that worked only half the time. Back then, I was still reeling from my divorce. The silence of the town felt heavier at night, especially when I wasn't on duty. I lived alone in a small apartment above the old hardware store. It had creaky floors, thin walls, and just enough space for one sad man and his regrets. Across the railroad tracks, past a patch of tall grass and a rusted fence, there was a house everyone avoided. It had been empty for years. No lights, no cars, no signs of life. Just a gray, weather-worn structure with broken shutters and a sagging porch. They said a woman named Claire lived there once. She'd gone missing after her husband passed. Some said she ran off. Others whispered she was still there, in the walls or the basement. No one ever checked. In Cedar Grove, we didn't chase ghosts. We just left them alone. But one cold October night, that changed. It was a Tuesday. The wind was sharp, the kind that made the street signs rattle and the trees whisper strange things. I was driving my usual patrol route when the radio crackled. "Deputy, we got a light on in the old Claire house. Caller says it's flickering. Like someone's inside." I paused. That place hadn't had power in years. "Copy that," I said, trying not to let my voice shake. I pulled up near the tracks and parked. Fog hung low over the field, thick and heavy, clinging to my boots as I crossed. The house looked darker than I remembered. But then, yes, there it was. A dim, flickering light in the top right window. It looked like candlelight. I called out. "Cedar Grove deputy. Anyone inside?" Nothing. The wooden steps groaned under my weight as I walked to the porch. The front door wasn't locked. It swung open slowly, like it had been waiting. Inside, the air was ice cold. It smelled like wet wood and dust. The wallpaper peeled in long strips, and the floor creaked with every step I took. The light upstairs was still flickering. I pulled out my flashlight and started up the stairs. Halfway up, I heard something. A whisper. Faint. Raspy. "Come back." I stopped cold. "Who's there?" I said. No reply. At the top of the stairs, I turned toward the lit room. The door was half open. I pushed it gently. The room was empty except for a small wooden chair in the middle of the floor. On it sat a candle in a glass jar. The flame danced wildly, like it was caught in a storm that I couldn't feel. Then I noticed something scratched into the wooden floor under the chair. Words. Dozens of them, overlapping. "Stay. Don't leave. Stay. Stay. Stay." I backed away. That's when I heard it again. But this time, it wasn't a whisper. It was a voice. Loud and angry. You promised. The candle blew out. Darkness. I fumbled for my flashlight and turned to run. But the hallway behind me was different. Longer. Twisted. The stairs were gone. My breath turned to fog in front of me. The air felt thicker. Heavier. Like I was underwater. Then I saw her. Claire. She stood at the end of the hall. Her eyes were wide and wet, like she'd been crying for years. Her mouth was open, but no sound came out. Her feet didn't touch the floor. She pointed at me. You said you'd help me, she mouthed. I shook my head. I don't even know you. The walls groaned. You promised. She screamed. The hallway began to collapse inward, like the house was folding in on itself. I ran, blindly, heart pounding, until I woke up. I was on the porch. Lying on the wood. Cold, wet, and alone. The house behind me was dark again. No candlelight. No whispering. I radioed it in, but no one believed me. The power company confirmed that house hadn't had electricity in over a decade. I tried to forget it. I told myself it was stress, sleep deprivation, maybe even a panic attack. But a week later, I got a package at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a photo. Claire. Her husband. And a third person. Me. But I'd never met them in my life. Had I? Now, some nights, when I drive by that house, I see the light again. Flickering in the same window. Sometimes I hear my own voice inside, whispering promises I don't remember making. What do you think happened to me in that house? Have you ever made a promise you didn't keep, and felt like someone was still waiting? I moved to Hollow Creek right after my divorce. It's a small town in northern Oregon and quiet, with just enough people to not feel alone, but not enough to notice when someone disappears for a few days. I needed peace. I needed space. And Hollow Creek gave me both. My new house sat at the edge of town, right where the forest thickens. It was an old two-story home with peeling white paint and a crooked mailbox. The air smelled of pine and wet earth. At night, the wind made the shutters knock softly against the windows. I told myself it was peaceful. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. After everything, I just wanted to start over. My daughter, Rachel, was staying with her mom. So it was just me. And the silence. The first few nights, I didn't sleep well. Not because I was scared, at least, not at first. It was just a new bed, a new house. Strange sounds. Pipes groaning. Floors creaking. I blamed it all on the house being old. But then one night, I woke up at exactly 3:12 a.m. My phone was on the nightstand, screen glowing faintly. A notification. Motion detected. Front hallway. I didn't have a pet. I wasn't expecting anyone. I rubbed my eyes and opened the camera app. The hallway was dark, but something was there. A shape. Just past the foot of the stairs. Still. Like it was listening. Watching. Then it was gone. I thought maybe the camera glitched. Maybe it picked up a shadow, or the wind had shifted something. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling. The next morning, I checked the camera feed. It showed nothing. Just darkness and silence. Over the next few nights, it kept happening. Always at the same time. Always in the hallway. Always gone by the time I looked again. I stopped sleeping well. I drank too much coffee. I stopped turning off the hallway light. Then came the whispers. They weren't loud. Just soft enough to make you wonder if you heard anything at all. They sounded like a woman. Or a girl. Or something pretending to be one. Daddy. I heard it while brushing my teeth. Are you there? I heard it while pouring my cereal. I checked every inch of the house. Attic. Basement. Nothing. No mice. No cracks in the wall. Nothing that explained the sound. I told myself it was stress. That I missed Rachel more than I thought. That maybe the loneliness was starting to play tricks on me. But deep down, I knew something was wrong with the house. I tried to stay out late, visiting the diner, chatting with locals, taking long drives through foggy roads that curved through the woods. One night, I talked to Officer Daniels, a kind old man who'd lived in Hollow Creek all his life. He asked how I liked the place. I hesitated, then told him I was having trouble sleeping. That I thought maybe the house had history. He didn't say much, just looked down and said quietly, "You're in the McAllister place, huh?" I nodded. He stared out at the fog rolling over the pavement. Girl went missing there. 12 years ago. Her dad found her diary. Said she used to talk to someone in the mirror upstairs. Thought it was just a phase. Until she vanished. House sat empty ever since. I didn't ask more. I didn't want to know. That night, I stood in front of the upstairs bathroom mirror. The glass was foggy. I hadn't looked closely before. But as I stared, I noticed faint lines scratched into the surface like a finger had traced something there years ago. "Come play." The letters were small, almost invisible unless the light hit just right. That was the first night I locked the bathroom door from the outside. I didn't know what else to do. The final straw came 2 nights later. I woke up, not to a sound, but to a feeling like someone was sitting on the edge of my bed. The mattress had a dip in it. My skin went cold. I turned over slowly. My heart thudded in my ears. And there she was. A girl, maybe 8 or 9. Wet hair. Bare feet. Pale, like she hadn't seen sunlight in years. Her head was tilted. Her mouth didn't move, but I heard her voice anyway. "You finally stayed." I tried to scream, but nothing came out. I blinked, and she was gone. The bed was still sunken. Cold. I packed my things the next morning. I didn't care if I lost the deposit. I didn't care if I looked crazy. I just needed to leave. Now I'm back in the city. I see Rachel more often. I sleep through the night. Most nights. But sometimes, around 3:12 a.m., I wake up. My phone buzzes. Motion detected. Front hallway. But I don't look anymore. What do you think happened in that house? Do you think she ever left? I moved to Silver Springs, a small town in Montana, after my wife passed away last winter. I needed quiet. I needed space to breathe. The big city was too loud, too fast, and too full of memories. I found a little house at the edge of town, tucked behind a row of pine trees. It wasn't perfect, just 2 bedrooms, creaky floors, and old heating, but it felt safe. Across from me was a wide field, dry and pale in the cold. On the other side of that field sat another house. Bigger, older. Empty. At least, I thought it was. The neighbors told me the house had been vacant for years. Some said it used to belong to a family that left suddenly. Others said they just disappeared. The windows were always dark. The porch sagged in the middle. The wooden swing in front never moved, not even when the wind howled. But about 2 weeks after I moved in, I saw something. It was late past midnight. I was in the kitchen drinking tea, staring out the window. That's when I noticed a dim orange glow coming from the house across the field. Like candlelight. I leaned closer. The light flickered in the window, just for a second. Then it went dark again. The next night, it happened again. Same window. Same glow. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe kids got in and were playing around. But every time I walked over during the day, the house looked the same. Still. Silent. Dead. One evening, I was taking out the trash when I saw someone on the porch. A tall figure. Standing still, facing my direction. I froze. The streetlight flickered overhead. When it came back on, the porch was empty. That night, I didn't sleep well. I kept hearing sounds, soft tapping, like footsteps on wood. I checked my doors twice. Then 3 times. They were locked. Still, I didn't feel alone. I decided to install a motion light on my front porch. I also set up a simple camera facing the field, just in case. That gave me some peace, for a while. But then I started dreaming about the house. In the dreams, I would walk across the field. The grass would crunch under my boots. The wind would blow cold and sharp. I'd reach the porch, and the door would already be open. Inside, it was always dark. But I'd hear whispering, like someone just behind the walls. Calling my name. I would wake up sweating, heart pounding. Every time. Then one night, the camera caught something. I checked the footage the next morning out of habit. At 2:43 a.m., the motion light flicked on. The footage showed someone, or something, standing at the edge of the field. Just standing. Facing my house. Not moving. The figure was blurry, like the lens didn't want to focus. It stayed there for over 10 minutes. Then it turned and walked slowly back toward the old house. I showed the clip to the sheriff. He's a good man. Been around town for decades. He watched the video quietly, then looked at me and said, "That place?" I'd let it be. That didn't help. For the next few nights, the figure came back. Sometimes it would move closer. Once, I saw it standing just a few yards from my porch, nearly in the shadows. But the moment I opened the door, it was gone. No footprints. No sound. Just cold air and silence. I tried blessing the house. I'm not very religious, but I figured it couldn't hurt. I burned sage. I prayed. I left the porch light on. It didn't stop. One morning, I found muddy prints on my back step. They were small, like a child's. But I live alone. That same day, I found a single marble on my windowsill. Green and cloudy. Cold to the touch. I threw it into the woods behind my house. The next day, it was back. Same marble. Same spot. I couldn't take it anymore. I waited until noon, grabbed a flashlight, and walked across the field. The grass felt thicker than it should. Like it didn't want me there. The porch creaked under my boots. The front door was closed, but it opened with barely a push. Inside, the air was heavy. Dust hung in beams of sunlight through broken curtains. The wallpaper peeled like old skin. In the living room was a single chair, facing the window. The one that looked at my house. I stepped closer and saw a drawing on the wall. A child's sketch, drawn in crayon. It showed a figure standing in a window, and another figure outside, watching. the outside figure had no face. That's when I heard it. A soft giggle. Right behind me. I turned, but no one was there. Just the silence. And the feeling of being watched. I backed out and ran. I've since moved away. Back to the city. No more fields. No more empty houses. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see that green marble. And sometimes, I dream about walking across the field again. I haven't told many people this. It sounds crazy, I know. But if you ever find a house watching you, don't watch back. You might see something you can't unsee. Hey everyone! I put a lot of effort and heart into creating these videos just for you. If you're enjoying the content, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a quick comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps me motivated to bring more awesome videos your way. I live in a small town called Pine Hollow. It's quiet here. We have one grocery store, 2 diners, and a post office that still closes at 4 p.m. Most of the houses are old, with wooden porches and squeaky steps. People know each other's names, and nothing big ever happens. Or at least, that's what we thought. I've been a police officer here for almost 12 years. My name's Chris. After my divorce last year, I moved into a small rental house at the edge of town. It was a 1-story place with peeling paint, a porch swing, and a single streetlight across the road that flickered every night. I liked the quiet. I needed it. It was the week before Halloween. The wind had started to feel sharp. Leaves were everywhere, scratching along the roads like dry whispers. Every house had pumpkins or plastic skeletons on the porch. Even mine, thanks to my sister. One night, I got home late. I had just finished a long shift, and my feet were killing me. I dropped my gear, made some coffee, and sat out on the porch. It was around midnight. Cold wind brushed my neck. The porch swing creaked. The streetlight flickered again and again. Then I saw it. Across the street, near the light, a man was standing. Still. Too still. He was tall and thin, wearing dark clothes. I couldn't see his face. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, half in the shadow. At first, I thought it might be a drunk or someone lost. I called out, "Hey! You okay?" No response. I stood up and took a few steps down the porch. The leaves under my boots made a soft crunch. I called again, "You need help?" Still no answer. I reached for my flashlight and shined it at him, but he was gone. Just like that. Vanished. I stepped into the street, heart thumping. But there was nothing. Only the cold. Only the flicker of the light. I told myself I was tired. Probably just my eyes playing tricks. But the next night, it happened again. Same time. Same spot. Same man. Standing just beyond the flickering streetlight. This time, he was a little closer. I didn't move. I just stared. He didn't wave, didn't walk. He just looked at me, or at least, I felt like he did. I couldn't see his face. And again, when I reached for my flashlight, gone. The third night, I didn't sit on the porch. I stayed inside and watched through the blinds. Midnight came. And sure enough, he was there. This time, he was on my side of the road. Right at the edge of my yard. Closer than before. He didn't move. He just stood under the shadow of the old oak tree. I called dispatch. Told them someone might be stalking my property. A few minutes later, my partner Jake drove by. Lights on, slow roll. No one was there. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I checked the camera I'd installed above the porch. It records motion. I went through the footage, midnight. My porch. The swing moved a little from the wind. The leaves blew. But no man. No shadow. Nothing at all. I was starting to feel like I was losing it. That weekend, my sister came by with her daughter, Lauren. We had dinner, and Lauren wanted to carve a pumpkin for my porch. She was excited, giggling as we lit the candle inside. That night, around 10 p.m., I tucked her into the guest room. She was asleep in minutes. My sister was staying too, so I felt a little more relaxed. Until I heard something. Creak. Creak. The porch swing. I looked out the window. He was sitting on it. The man. Not standing this time. Sitting. Still. Looking forward. Head slightly tilted like he was listening. My chest got tight. I grabbed my flashlight and badge and rushed out the door. But the porch was empty. The swing moved back and forth slowly. No footprints. No sound. Just the wind and the soft rustle of dry leaves. Inside, I checked on Lauren, still sleeping. My sister was reading on the couch. She hadn't heard anything. The next morning, Lauren told me something that made my skin crawl. "Uncle Chris," she said. "Who was the man in the hallway last night?" I froze. "What man?" She pointed. "The one with no face. He stood in the doorway. I think he was cold. He didn't say anything." I asked my sister if she'd seen anyone. She hadn't. That evening, I boarded up the porch swing and placed salt across every door and window, something an old vet I worked with once said he did when weird things started happening in his own home. The man never came back after that. But I still feel like he's out there. Watching. Waiting. Sometimes, when I walk home after a night shift, I can hear it. Creak. 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 The sound of the swing, moving all on its own. Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. I grew up in Pine Hollow, a quiet town hidden deep in northern Michigan. Folks there liked their routines. They locked their doors early and waved at each other on the streets. I became a deputy right after high school. Not because I dreamed of being one, but because I didn't know what else to do. My dad had just passed. Cancer. Quick and cruel. I was still reeling when I put on the uniform. It made me feel like I had a purpose. At first, the job was simple. Drunk teens at the lake. Missing dogs. Old folks calling about raccoons in their sheds. Nothing ever really happened in Pine Hollow. Until last fall. It started on a cold night in October. The kind of night where the wind slides under your jacket and you swear you hear whispers in the trees. I was working the late shift, driving past old barns and leaf-covered roads, the cruiser heater barely working. Dispatch radioed in. A neighbor called about a light flickering inside the old Markham house. That place had been empty for 20 years. Everyone said it was haunted, but most small towns had a house like that. I almost ignored the call. Figured it was a prank or just someone seeing things in the fog. But I needed the drive to keep from falling asleep. When I got there, the porch light was blinking. On. Off. On again. I parked outside and walked up the creaky wooden steps. The air smelled like rotting leaves and damp wood. I knocked once. The echo of my knock disappeared into the dark. No answer. I tried the door. It creaked open, slow like it had been waiting. I stepped inside, hand resting on my holster, just in case. The floor groaned under my boots. It was cold. Colder than outside. Dust floated in the air, and I could hear a faint hum, like a distant radio that couldn't quite find the right station. Anyone here? I called. No answer. I walked through the first room. Broken furniture. Old wallpaper peeling like dry skin. Then I saw a dim light coming from the back room. The door was open just a crack. The humming grew louder. I pushed it open. Inside was a small, square room. In the middle stood an old TV. No furniture. No signs anyone had lived there in decades. The TV was on, showing nothing but static. I stepped closer. The hum buzzed in my ears. My skin crawled. Then, the screen changed. A face. Just for a second. Pale. White eyes. Black mouth open like a scream caught in time. Then it was gone. Back to static. I stood frozen. My breath caught in my throat. The TV turned off on its own. Click. The room went silent. I turned and left fast. I didn't care if someone was hiding upstairs or if it was just a power surge. I wasn't going to be the guy who stayed and ended up a story people whispered about. Back in the car, I locked the doors and called dispatch. Told them the place was empty. Didn't mention the face. Didn't mention the TV. I drove away with my hands shaking on the wheel. But that wasn't the end. That night, when I got home, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. I wish I hadn't. There was no voice. Just that same hum from the house. Then static. Then, my name. Whispered. Twice. Click. Call ended. I didn't sleep. Just sat by the window, waiting for something to knock. The next morning, I went back to the Markham house. The TV was gone. The room was empty, clean like no one had touched it in years. I asked around. No one had seen lights. No one had made the call. In fact, dispatch said they never logged any such report. I checked the phone number that called me. It didn't exist. I tried to move on. Tried to tell myself it was stress, maybe even grief. But the nights got worse. The dreams came. Always the same room. Always the same face. And every now and then, my phone buzzes. No number. No sound. Just static. My name's Chris. I live in a small town called Pine Hollow, just outside of Asheville. It's the kind of place where everyone knows each other. Quiet streets, big front porches, and a gas station that still does full service. I work night shifts at the local sheriff's office. Not much happens around here, just the occasional noise complaint or runaway dog. Most nights, the radio stays quiet. But last October, something strange happened. Something I still don't understand. It was the first cold night of fall. The wind was sharp, and the leaves scraped across the road like dry whispers. I remember that because the station's heater was broken, and my fingers were stiff on the keys. At around 2:12 a.m., we got a call. The line was full of static at first. Then a man's voice came through. Soft. Tired. Can you send someone to Ridgeway Road? He said. Ridgeway was a dead-end street with only one house at the very back. An old place. Nobody had lived there for years, not since the Darnell family moved out. What's the issue, sir? I asked. They're in the walls, he said. I paused. Who's in the walls? He didn't answer. Just breathed into the phone. Then he whispered, they watch me sleep. They know my name. The call dropped. I tried to call back, but the number didn't trace. No signal, no log. Just gone. I radioed Officer Megan, who was on patrol near that side of town. She agreed to swing by the Ridgeway house and check it out. 10 minutes later, I heard her voice crackle through the radio. Chris. I'm outside the house. It looks wrong. What do you mean wrong? I asked. She paused. I don't know. The lights are on, but there's no power out here. That place hasn't had a meter in years. My gut twisted. I told her to wait for backup, but she said she'd just take a quick look and report back. Megan was always brave like that. 3 minutes passed. Then 5. Then her voice came back, lower now. I'm inside. No one's here, but it smells like firewood. And there's a noise in the walls. I sat up straight. Megan, get out. Now. The radio hissed. Then a click. And silence. I called her again and again. Nothing. I drove out there myself. The fog on Ridgeway was thick that night. My headlights barely cut through it. When I got to the house, everything looked still. The porch light flickered like it was powered by a dying battery. Megan's patrol car was out front. Door wide open. I called her name. Walked through the front door. The air inside was cold. Too cold for October. I smelled ash and something sweet, like rotting fruit. The house was empty. But the walls, they were making a sound. Not animals. Not pipes. It sounded like breathing. Slow, steady breathing. I called out again, but nothing answered. In the hallway, I saw Megan's flashlight lying on the floor. Still on. The beam pointed toward the basement door, which stood half open. I didn't want to go down there. But I had to. Each step creaked. The kind of sound that echoes in your bones. I reached the bottom and saw nothing but concrete, shadows, and dust. Then something moved in the corner. A shadow. But there was no one there. The air got heavy. Like it was pressing against my chest. I backed up the stairs, heart pounding, and left the house without looking back. We searched the property the next morning. There was no trace of Megan. No prints. No blood. No sign she'd ever been inside. Her car was towed. The flashlight disappeared. And the house? It looked abandoned again. Like no one had touched it in years. The lights were off. The porch light shattered. A week later, someone called the station again at night. Same voice. Same line. Can you send someone to Ridgeway Road? But this time, when I answered, the voice was Megan's. Soft. Tired. They're in the walls, she said. They know my name. The line went dead. I didn't answer that call. I couldn't. No one goes near that house now. The locals call it the breather. They say once you hear the breathing in the walls, you're never seen again. I leave flowers on Ridgeway Road every October. Not because I believe she's gone, but because I think she's still in there. Watching. Listening. Have you ever heard something that shouldn't be there, something that felt alive? Hey everyone! I put a lot of effort and heart into creating these videos just for you. If you're enjoying the content, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a quick comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps me motivated to bring more awesome videos your way. I grew up in a small town called Elk Hollow, tucked deep in the Appalachian Mountains. It's one of those places where everyone knows everyone. Quiet. Peaceful. Or at least, it used to be. My name's Chris Miller. I'm a local police officer. Been serving this town for over 10 years. I've seen drunk fights, missing cats, and the occasional wild animal breaking into stores. Nothing big. Nothing strange. Until last fall. It started after Halloween. The leaves were dying, and cold wind whistled through the empty streets. That's when we got a call about an old farmhouse just outside town. The woman on the phone said she heard screaming coming from it. Now, that house had been empty for decades. Locals said it was cursed. But most people just thought it was haunted in the way old houses are, creaky and full of stories. I didn't believe in ghosts. I took the call, drove out there alone. It was almost midnight. The sky was dark and cloudy, and the wind was strong. The trees swayed like they were whispering secrets. When I reached the house, I parked on the gravel path. My headlights lit up the front porch. The paint was peeling. The wood was gray and soft. The door hung slightly open. I stepped out of my car. The air was cold. I could hear the sound of dry leaves scraping across the porch. I called out. "Hello? This is Officer Miller. Is anyone here?" No answer. I walked up slowly, my boots crunching on the path. Every step felt louder than it should have been. When I reached the door, I pushed it open. The hinges moaned. The air inside smelled like dust and something sweet, like flowers left to rot. I stepped inside. It was quiet. Too quiet. The house was dark except for the faint moonlight coming through broken windows. I clicked on my flashlight and called out again. "Hello? I'm just checking on a noise report." Nothing. I swept the light across the living room. Old furniture covered in sheets. A fireplace with blackened stone. A cracked mirror on the wall. My light landed on something in the corner. A small wooden box. It was open, but I couldn't see what was inside. I walked toward it, then heard something behind me. Whispering. I spun around. No one there. Just the wind outside. Or so I thought. Then I heard it again. Soft. Close. Right next to my ear. "Help us." I stepped back fast, nearly tripping over the box. I pulled out my radio. It crackled, but no one answered. I tried again. Still nothing. I should have left then. I should have walked out, called it in, and gone home. But I didn't. I moved deeper into the house. The floorboards creaked under my feet. The hallway stretched ahead like a tunnel. I checked every door. Empty bedrooms. An old kitchen. A staircase leading down to the basement. I didn't want to go down there. But something, curiosity, maybe pushed me forward. The basement door groaned as I opened it. A cold, damp smell rose up. I aimed my flashlight down the stairs and saw more dust. Cobwebs. Crumbling stone walls. I took each step slowly. My breath came out in little clouds. The air was freezing. At the bottom, I found shelves stacked with old jars and tools. But one thing caught my eye: a circle of black candles. All burned down. In the middle was a broken phone. An old model. Dead. I bent down and touched it. That's when the voices started. Louder now. Crying. Begging. Don't leave us. Please. I backed away, my heart racing. The flashlight flickered. Then it shut off completely. Darkness swallowed me. I tried turning it back on, but it was dead. So was my radio. I was trapped in that basement, in the dark, with voices I couldn't explain. I felt something brush past me. Cold. Like fingers. I ran. I don't even remember climbing the stairs. But suddenly I was outside again. Gasping for air. The wind howled. My hands were shaking. When I got to my car, it wouldn't start. I looked back at the house. In the upstairs window, I saw a face. Pale. Still. Watching me. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't tell anyone what happened either. Who would believe me? But I did some digging later. That house belonged to the Granger family. 3 kids. Parents. They all went missing in the 80s. Never found. People said the father practiced dark rituals in the basement. Some said he trapped their souls. I always thought that was just a story. Now I'm not so sure. I still drive by that house sometimes. But I never go in. And if you ever find yourself near Elk Hollow, don't stop at the old Granger place. Especially if you hear someone whisper your name. Everyone in Pine Hollow knew about the Widow's Hollow. It was a stretch of land tucked behind the woods, where the trees grew tight together, and the fog always lingered a little longer than it should. Some said it was cursed. Others just said it was forgotten. Officer Megan Doyle had lived in Pine Hollow her whole life. She returned after her husband passed away in a car crash 2 years ago. The city was too loud, too fast, too full of reminders. The quiet town helped. But the silence still followed her home. She worked nights now, patrolling the quiet roads, checking in on empty buildings, and helping the few folks who still left their porch lights on. One cold October night, she was finishing her shift. The wind outside whistled through cracks in her cruiser's window. Leaves swirled across the road like little ghosts. Her radio buzzed gently, but no calls came through. That's when she saw it. A soft blue light, blinking slowly in the distance deep in the trees behind Widow's Hollow. She slowed the car. That land hadn't been used in years. No homes. No cabins. And no one had any reason to go there. At first, she thought it was just a broken power line. Or maybe kids messing around. But something about the rhythm of the light, it pulsed, almost like it was breathing. She hesitated. Then she reached for her flashlight and stepped out. The wind bit at her cheeks. The air smelled like damp soil and burnt wood. Her boots crunched on the cold ground as she followed the path through the trees. The deeper she walked, the quieter it got. No birds. No wind. Just the soft sound of her breath and the dull thump of her heart. And the light. It stayed ahead of her. Always just out of reach. Floating. Waiting. Megan called out. Hello? Anyone out here? No answer. The light blinked once. Then again. She raised her flashlight and moved forward. Her beam cut through the fog, revealing an old wooden post, barely standing, with a faded sign that read Miller Property, Keep Out. She remembered the Millers. They used to live here decades ago. The husband had vanished during a thunderstorm. The wife, Eleanor, never left. They said she wandered the woods for days, calling his name, until she died in the barn behind their house. People said her spirit still walked the hollow. Megan never believed it. Until now. Just past the post, the fog parted slightly, and she saw it. A house. Old. Rotten. Its roof sagged, and one of the shutters swung back and forth in the wind, creaking like an old swing. The light floated up the steps and disappeared through the front door. Megan's mouth went dry. She stepped forward. Slowly. Carefully. Each wooden step groaned beneath her boots. She pushed the door open. The air inside was colder. It smelled like dust, mold, and something faintly sweet like lilacs left too long in water. The house was still. Furniture draped in sheets. Paint peeling from the walls. A mirror on the far wall showed her reflection, but something about it looked off. Her reflection didn't blink when she did. She turned away. The light was gone. Megan stepped into what must have been the living room. A faded rug lay beneath her feet. The fireplace was filled with old ashes. Then she heard it. A whisper. Soft. Like it came from the next room. Megan. Her blood froze. She swung her flashlight toward the sound, but the beam flickered. Then died. The room went dark. Her radio crackled. Then a voice, her own voice, came through. Help me. Her breath hitched. She turned to run, but the doorway behind her had vanished. Just wall. Her heart pounded. Her legs refused to move. Then, the light returned. It hovered in the corner of the room. Slowly drifting closer. Megan stared, unable to speak. The light stopped a few feet away. And then, just barely, a figure took shape inside it. A woman. Pale. Eyes like shadows. Dressed in a torn nightgown. Megan knew that face. Eleanor Miller. But she wasn't angry. She didn't scream. She simply looked sad. She raised one hand. Pointed behind Megan. Megan turned. A door. One that hadn't been there before. She reached for it. Opened it. And there, in a small room, was a mirror. Not broken. Not dirty. Clean. Clear. And inside it, her husband. He looked just like she remembered. He smiled. Reached out. Touched the glass from his side. Megan, he said softly. It's okay. You can let go. Her chest ached. Her hands trembled. She stepped forward. But then she remembered. She was alive. He was not. She whispered, not yet. The mirror shattered. The light vanished. And she was standing outside again. In the cold. On the path. No house behind her. No door. No light. Just trees. Just wind. She staggered back to her cruiser. Drove home in silence. She didn't tell anyone what she saw. But from that night on, she stopped chasing ghosts in the woods and in her heart. She still drives past the hollow. The wind always howls louder there. And sometimes she sees that light again. But she doesn't stop. Because some things aren't meant to follow us home. Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Everyone in Aspen Creek, a quiet town tucked between foggy hills and thick woods, knew about the old radio tower on Miller's Ridge. It had been out of service since the early 2000s. Rust covered the base. The door was chained shut. Locals said it hummed sometimes during storms, but no one ever stuck around to find out. Officer Ryan lived nearby. He wasn't one for ghost stories. He was a single dad, mid-30s, trying to rebuild life after a divorce. Nights were the hardest. His daughter, Emily, spent most weekends with his ex. The silence in the house left too much space for thinking. On a rainy Sunday evening, Ryan's police radio crackled while he made dinner. The voice wasn't dispatch. It was static at first. Then a woman's whisper. "Help, trapped, tower, please." Ryan froze. He waited for it to repeat, but the radio went silent. He checked with dispatch. They said no one had sent anything. Thinking it might be a prank, Ryan decided to check out the tower just to be sure. The storm was just picking up when he arrived. The woods were cold. Wet leaves stuck to his boots. The tower loomed above, its red light still blinking faintly like a dying heartbeat. The chain on the door was broken. Inside, it smelled like rust and wet concrete. Ryan's flashlight flickered as he stepped in. The stairs creaked with every step. On the third level, he found a room with old equipment and wires dangling like vines. There was a heavy silence. No sign of anyone. Then his radio crackled again. This time louder. "You shouldn't be here." Ryan spun around. No one. Just empty metal walls and the drip of rain from the ceiling. The voice came again, this time softer. "Closer. She's watching." He felt cold air on his neck. Turning sharply, his flashlight caught something. A woman's face. Pale. Hollow eyes. Then she vanished. Ryan stumbled backward, nearly falling down the stairs. The voice followed him, whispering from different corners of the tower. "Help me, she won't let go." Back outside, the rain poured harder. Ryan slammed the door shut and called for backup. But when help arrived, the tower was empty. The chain was back in place. His radio? Dead. The department checked the tower records. Nobody had access. No history of break-ins. And the frequency that voice came through? Disconnected 2 decades ago. Ryan didn't talk much about it after that. But he kept the radio on every night. Sometimes it would buzz faintly around 3 a.m., when the winds hit just right. He never answered it again. But the voice still calls. Have you ever heard something that wasn't meant for you? It happened in the town of Silver Hollow, the kind of quiet place with one diner, a single blinking stoplight, and a main road that rolled straight through without a bend. Everyone knew each other's names. Kids biked until dusk. Dogs roamed free. Officer Jake Larson had lived there his whole life. He wasn't a big city type. After his wife passed 2 winters ago, he didn't want much, just peace. Most nights, he'd take the cruiser out past the edge of town to a stretch called Willow Road. Nothing ever happened there. It was his favorite place to sit and think. Let the engine hum. Let the silence settle. But one night in early November, that silence felt different. It was cold. The kind of cold that sinks into your bones and stays. Trees were bare. The air smelled like frost and old wood. Jake pulled the cruiser to the side, killed the engine, and sat in the dark. Only the dashboard light glowed. He cracked the window to feel the night air. And then, he heard it. A whisper. Soft. almost like wind. But it wasn't the wind. It was a voice. He leaned out. Nothing. Just trees and a broken fence line. Then again, closer. Jake. He flinched. That voice knew his name. It was faint, like someone speaking through a wall. He grabbed the flashlight and stepped out. The gravel crunched under his boots. He swept the light across the trees. Nothing. No footprints. No rustling. Just cold air and that eerie whisper, circling him like a fog. Jake, you left me. His heart dropped. It was Emily's voice. His wife's. No. It couldn't be. She'd been gone almost 2 years. Cancer took her. He was there. He buried her. He saw the casket lower into the ground. This had to be a trick. His mind playing games. But the whisper came again, closer, more urgent. You promised you'd never leave me alone. Jake stumbled back toward the cruiser. His hand shook as he tried to unlock the door. The flashlight flickered. Then died. The whisper turned into something else, a soft cry. Like someone was just behind him. He spun around. Nothing. But the cruiser headlights, they turned on by themselves. And in the beam, for just a second, he saw her. Standing in the middle of Willow Road. Barefoot. Hair blowing in the wind. Pale face, eyes locked on his. Emily. Or something that looked like her. He blinked, and she was gone. Jake drove off that night, hands white on the wheel. He didn't sleep. But he kept going back. Every few nights, he returned to the same spot. The voices came again. Sometimes Emily's. Sometimes others. Children laughing. A man sobbing. A woman screaming his name. Sometimes the radio would crackle with old songs, songs that hadn't played in decades. And always, the whispers. He didn't tell anyone. Who would believe him? He was the sheriff. The guy people trusted. But inside, he was breaking. He started seeing her in dreams. Not the Emily he remembered, but a hollow version. Pale. Quiet. Watching from the foot of his bed. And then one night, she spoke to him in the dream. Come back to me, Jake. He woke up gasping. Cold sweat. His room smelled like old lilacs, Emily's favorite. That same night, his cruiser wouldn't start. Not until he said her name aloud. Emily. Then it roared to life. Jake finally confided in Lauren, the local librarian. She believed in ghosts. Always had. She told him Willow Road used to be an old path for funeral processions. Before the cemetery was moved. Before the land got sold and turned into forest. Maybe the dead never really left, she said. Maybe they're waiting. Jake asked her to come with him. Just once. To see. They drove out the next night. Fog rolled over the ground. The trees looked like twisted arms. It was cold enough to see their breath. Jake stopped the car where he always did. At first, it was silent. Then, the radio turned on by itself. A soft piano song. Lauren gasped. That's home again. That's not even on your station. Jake nodded. It was their song. His and Emily's. Then the headlights flickered. And in front of the car, the fog parted. She was there again. Lauren whispered, Jake, do you see her? He nodded. She's not alone, Lauren said. Behind Emily, dozens of shadows. Standing still. Watching. Men, women, even children. Jake stepped out of the car. Emily? he called. She raised her hands slowly. He took a step forward. The ground felt soft, like earth ready to give. Then Emily spoke. "Come with me." Jake froze. Lauren shouted, "No! Don't move!" The shadows began to close in. The air turned icy. The whispers grew louder, overlapping like a chorus of grief. Jake stumbled back. Emily's eyes filled with tears. "You left me." And then she vanished. So did the shadows. The fog. The song. Silence. Jake never went back to Willow Road. He quit the force a month later. Sold his house. Moved 2 towns over. But sometimes, late at night, he hears the whispers again. Through the radio. In the walls. In his sleep. "Jake, you left me."